So I'll go ahead and turn it over to Jeff Sudmeyer, Kay Kelly, Piper Darlington, and Emily Hadaway.
Good. Thank you, Chair. So thank you again for the opportunity to come back and talk more Bustang with you. We really appreciated the robust dialogue we had with both boards last month. And really the focus of our presentation this month is on answering a lot of the questions that came up during that conversation. So before we get started, I did want to recognize Paul DeRocher, our Director of Transit and Rail, and also our service planning team who helped put together a lot of this content. Paul is on a much deserved week away from the office for spring break with his family, so you're stuck with me for the presentation, but Paul will be back next month, but did want to recognize them before we got started. So you can go to the next slide. So we're going to be starting with some additional quantification of Bustang benefits, providing more details on Bustang ridership by service, presenting some options for service optimization to meet whatever our available budget could be going forward. And then Jeff will take us through the various CDOT funding sources with transit eligibility and how those either do or don't help us in terms of filling the Bustang funding gap. So that's our focus is really on providing more transportation options for Colorado to move about how they want and reduce the burden of only having a signal option available. We recognize that there are certainly areas where transit service is poor or there's free parking and driving can really be the only realistic option, but the provision of public transit does save people money by providing them travel options that are less expensive, allowing them to use their income on other priorities. Next slide. We also had several questions last month about the general benefits of public transit. And here's where we're going to get into the economic concept of positive externalities. If you remember back to your economics classes, but these are positive externalities occur where benefits accrue to people who aren't actually directly participating in the activity. So in the case of public transit, even if you aren't personally interested in or taking advantage of public transit, you do definitely benefit from it existing in the first place. So from an environmental perspective, I love the picture on the top. I use it a lot. It's a nice visual that really encapsulates a lot of the environmental impacts of public transit. So the photo shows how much physical space 50 people take up on a roadway if they each drove alone versus if they all took a bus. So as I mentioned before, it's not always possible for everyone to take the bus, but even if half or a third of the people in this picture took the bus, you need significantly less roadway space to allow for traffic movement. That has an impact on how much transportation infrastructure we need to build and maintain, and how much green space is preserved for everyone to enjoy. From an emissions perspective, buses are big vehicles, and yes, one bus uses more fuel and produces more emissions than one car, but a bus can fit way more people. So we actually break even from a greenhouse gas and emissions perspective when a Bustang bus has about 15 people on board, which most of our trips do. So air quality benefits are accruing to everyone when we're running buses, even if they're only a third full. From an energy efficiency perspective, public transit saves approximately 4.2 billion gallons of gasoline annually. That's through the efficiencies of shared travel. And the savings get even greater the more people you have on each of the buses. I'll also note that Bustang is a mitigation element in CDOT's greenhouse gas planning rule compliance strategy. So we are taking credit for Bustang trips in order to achieve are reductions to comply with the rule. So that's another consideration. If we scale back Bustang services, we will need to spend money on other mitigation strategies to backfill the reductions being achieved by Bustang at our current levels of service. Also, social benefits. Ensuring public transit ensures that people without cars can still get out and about, visit friends and family, attend social events. That reduces social isolation and the negative impacts that can have. It encourages more walking, increasing physical activity, which improves overall health, decreases the burdens on the healthcare system, supports the development of vibrant, walkable neighborhoods. From an economic perspective, I know it's hard to see with the box over it there, but fewer cars does mean reduced congestion, which allows all vehicles to move around more efficiently on the network. Again, the benefits of transit extending to non-transit users because personal vehicle drivers and truck drivers benefit because when there's congestion, it increases their operating costs, adds to their travel time, and can even have some broader impacts on the economy, things like increasing the time and reducing reliability with which goods can work in businesses. And transit-oriented development is actually shown to boost property values, increase job density, job access, which also increases foot traffic to businesses and lowers transportation expenses for the people who live in those neighborhoods. So lots of things about transit that we know and experience as a positive externality. On the next slide, the American Public Transit Association uses this statistic a lot. They've been using it for many years. They just actually reaffirmed it in their most recent Economic Impact of Public Transportation report that was released just a few weeks ago. But their research has long suggested that public transportation generates a 5 times return on investment, which seems to be even a pretty conservative estimate. There was some recent research out of MIT that suggests that the return on investment may be even higher. One of the MIT research teams worked with some cities to assess the value of transit. And their example from Chicago showed that for every $1 invested in transit, it was yielding a $13 economic return for the city. Our own local example might be Union Station. That was a $500 million public investment that generated a 7 times return in this case, $3.5 billion in private development spurred from that. I think it'll also be interesting to look at the impacts of our mobility hubs as we accrue more data there. They haven't been open very long to be able to kind of mine that data quite yet, but I think we've got some good opportunities, especially thinking about like Centera Loveland and some of those mobility hubs in the north. On the next slide, this is looking at the stops served by Bustang. You can see that the service is clearly connecting people to economic centers across the state. We've highlighted 6 stops here showing the jobs within 1 mile of the Bustang stop itself and the jobs within those city limits. So Bustang may either connect people directly to a job within 1 mile of that stop, or it could be a situation where Bustang connects to a local transit service that can then get someone to an employment or education opportunity, medical campus, or into a business district where they can support the local economy with their purchases. On the next slide, safety is another benefit of public transit. Go to the next slide. There we go. So transit has only 1/10 the traffic death or injury rate as traveling by car. Transit-oriented neighborhoods are 1/5. Public transit does employ professional drivers who exhibit far less aggressive and impaired driving behaviors. So that leads to fewer crashes. When there are fewer crashes, there are also reduced costs associated with traffic enforcement, with emergency services, not to mention those time costs associated with sitting in traffic and waiting for the crashes to be cleared. On the next slide, so clearly lots of benefits, not a surprise that we want public transit to thrive in Colorado. We were asked last month how Bustang fits into our overall strategy for transportation. The points I just mentioned are also touched on in our Colorado Transportation Vision 2035 document, which identifies transit as one of those cornerstone strategies for reducing pollution, advancing affordability, and improving quality of life in Colorado. And as CDOT has really purposefully integrated transit infrastructure into I-25 and I-70, and as we've increased service to make taking the bus a possibility for more travelers, Bustang is contributing to these goals directly and also to this overall vision for Colorado's transportation network. From here, we're going to shift and start talking about ridership. That was one of the other big themes of questions from last month. So just as a reminder, we offer several different types of service. So often when we talk about Bustang, we refer to the Bustang family of services. So that includes our Bustang Mainline, which is our original service on the interstates. This is the high frequency kind of connective spine for transit in the state. Outrider is our rural connector service. Pegasus is our express shuttle service on I-70 West. And then finally, our seasonal services, which are really focused on getting folks to events and seasonal destinations. That's where things like Bustang to Broncos, Snowstang, Estes Park services are in there. So we'll go through ridership for each of these services individually, and then at the end, we'll kind of summarize what the whole system looks like. So starting with the main line, 2025 saw 303,000 riders, surpassing our pre-pandemic peak by more than 60,000 passengers. And 2025 was our first full year of expanded service levels. So this is a full calendar year at those higher levels of service. So the North Line is in green, the South Line is in orange, and the West Line in blue. You can see on the bar chart that the West Line is moving the most people, about 135,000 passengers per year. But we do see a bit more seasonality on the West Line. And you can see on the line chart that there are a few months where North Line was surpassing West Line in terms of ridership, which is really exciting. Our farebox revenue from the mainline services was just shy of $4 million in 2025. That's on the next slide. Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. So the West Line, when you look at the farebox recovery ratio, the West Line is certainly moving the most people. It's also the longest route. You can go back to the, yep, there we go. Yep, that's it. So our farebox revenue was just shy of $4 million in 2025. West Line's moving the most people. It's also the longest route. So with tickets priced based on mileage, it's not a surprise to see that West Line was bringing in the most overall revenue. They had about $2.4 million last year. North Line around 900,000, South Line around 600,000. When you consider the farebox recovery ratio, which is basically, it's a very kind of quick and dirty methodology. It's basically fare revenue divided by the operating expense. We actually see North Line edging out the West Line. This tells us that the North Line is a really efficient route, but I would caution that farebox recovery is not a complete picture. It's really just one number divided by another number, and it clearly doesn't take into account all the positive externalities that we discussed earlier. And of course, there isn't a single transit agency in the world that is anywhere close to 100% farebox recovery. In terms of national trends, that's the chart on the bottom. We don't have a great apples to apples comparison for a service like Bustang, but a typical bus farebox recovery is around 7%. Commuter bus, which is defined as routes of about 30 miles, is more like 24%. And Bustang, which is really truly a breed of its own, running routes that are, double what a commuter bus is, or 240 miles. And when you're looking at the West Line, our farebox recovery is about 20%. We're recovering about 20% of our costs. So definitely competitive with national averages, although there isn't really a great comparator for us. On the next slide, we break down our costs. So West Line is the most expensive route to operate. Again, this is directly related to how long it is. We also show fleet replacement and mobility hub expenses as their own categories here. This is because the large coach buses do get cycled around the entire network. A bus doesn't always drive the same route. They aren't assigned to a particular line all the time. And then the mobility hub expenses are part of a statewide contract. So those are broken out separately. So on a percentage basis, West Line is 55% of mainline expenses, followed by fleet costs, which fluctuate a little every year based on how many buses we need to replace, but those average about 15% per year. South Line is about 15% of our annual mainline costs, North Line around 11 to 12. And the next slide is just one more interesting data point on mainline showing by stop. So clearly Union Stingers there. We also have Fort Collins, Frisco, Glenwood Springs, and Colorado Springs rounding out the top 5 in terms of boardings by stop. So that's the main line. Moving to the next slide, this will take us to Outrider. So overall, we're serving far fewer passengers on Outrider than we are on Mainline, but that's because this service has a very different characteristic and purpose than the main lines. These are one trip a day. They're from rural areas into urban areas. But Outrider does continue to do very well overall. We saw a 9% increase in ridership last year, with many of the routes seeing double-digit increases in ridership. Overall, it was another record year for Outrider. In the notes of the table, we're highlighting a few service changes that we've made in the last year. So this includes adding that second trip on the Crested Butte to Denver route, which we talk about a lot. It's been phenomenally successful. We also just recently added back the Canyon City stop on the Alamosa to Pueblo route. And we added the stop at Denver International Airport late 2024 on the Sterling to Denver route, with also some weekend service added on that route as well. We're also always looking at opportunities to optimize our service. So we did discontinue service on the Sterling to Greeley route at the beginning of the year due to some low ridership. That actually allowed us to add in the additional service on the Sterling route. That's how we were able to kind of do that. That was a revenue neutral change. And at the fine print on the bottom, we did note that we canceled the Telluride to Grand Junction service in February of last year. That was seeing some declining ridership. And really, this was a situation where we were making some of the same stops on our Durango to Grand Junction route as we were on this one. And also the local agency SMART was starting to add service connecting into our existing Outrider route. So that optimization allowed us to free up a vehicle, and that's the vehicle that we use to double service on the Crested Butte route. So always looking at ways that we can move things around. Next up is Pegasus. Pegasus is a bit of an outlier for us because ridership has been slipping recently, which we are attributing to actually a few things. First of all, the increased service on the West Line means that we have some schedule overlaps between the two services to the point where they're actually competing with one another instead of complementing one another like they were when we originally started the Pegasus routes. We also know that our passengers really appreciate the larger variety of amenities that we have on the main line. The mainline buses have bathrooms, they have more luggage storage, they have the big windows, and Westline is also a less expensive ticket. So passengers are preferring the Bustang trips over the Pegasus trips, and we're seeing some decline in the Pegasus ridership. We clearly see this as an optimization opportunity, but for right now, Pegasus is listed as a mitigation action on the Floyd Hill project. So we need to ensure that any service changes we put here are kind of thoroughly vetted and approved so that as it relates to kind of that overall Floyd Hill strategy. So next up is our seasonal services. So you can see that overall ridership on the seasonals is pretty steady and growing modestly from year to year. Snowstang is our biggest seasonal service in terms of ridership and saw 7% growth in 2025. The Broncos had a good season, so Bustang to Broncos did really well as in addition to that. Bustang to Estes and Rams route saw some decreases, but considering the size of these services, the 3% and 4% decreases are actually pretty negligible in the overall picture. For Rams route, we think that the increase in Northline service may actually be having some impact there. But it's still performing well. It has greater than 50% load, greater than 50% farebox recovery. And this is only a single round trip per week and only when CSU is in session. So the differentiation really between Rams route and the North Line is that the Rams route stops directly on the CSU campus and it has seat reservations. So it's offering a more specialized service. But we do think that there's likely some intrepid CSU students who are using the North Line instead of the Rams route. So. On the next slide, this rolls up all the services into a single slide. Overall, you can see ridership on the Bustang family of services was up 24% last year. Much of that growth attributed to the main lines with some strong contributions from Outrider as well. We've served more than 2.3 million riders over 10 years and have seen 6 consecutive years of growth. So overall, really strong performance system-wide. On the next slide, one of the other questions we received last month was whether we had considered any efficiency measures to cut costs. So the short answer is yes, definitely, absolutely. I've been pointing out some of the route optimizations as we've gone through, but flagging a couple additional points here that we've been working on. So we did really see some great improvements on the North Line as the new mobility hubs came online. Those have direct express lane access for the buses. And we really can't discount the operational efficiencies that those provide. We're saving time and miles every time we don't have to divert a bus off the highway, go through a parking lot, wait for traffic signals, merge back onto the highway. So these mobility hubs were huge in terms of operational improvements on the North Line. And I think you see that bearing out in the Farebox recovery numbers. Similarly, we were able to work with our partners in Idaho Springs on their mobility hub plans on I-70 to incorporate some of those lessons learned from I-25 to make sure that our buses were staying as close to the highway as possible instead of diverting off the highway and into the town so that we can get some of those same efficiencies with the West Line as well. We are about to release an RFP for Outrider. That contract has been in place for 5 years. That's the maximum amount of time we can have a contract in place in the state. So it's time for it to be recompeted, and that'll be a great opportunity for us to renegotiate rates and operators for those services. So more to come once those responses start trickling in, but I'm expecting that we could see some efficiencies from that contract as well. We do have partnerships in place for the Snowstang service. So in that case, the resorts and CDOT are in a 60-40 cost share arrangement, which keeps our costs very low on Snowstang. We've also been working with other local jurisdictions who are interested in new or expanded Outrider routes to partner with us on the costs so that CDOT isn't the only contributor. So in some cases, the locals are able to pick up those routes instead of Bustang. And in some cases, we're really excited to see some of the local operators stepping up and implementing some of our transit connection study recommendations for new service. And a lot of times they're using the SB 230 dollars to do that. So a good example of this is the Granby to Grand Lake recommendation. So our study indicated this was a missing connection to get travelers from Winter Park's transit area or from the Craig to Denver Outrider service up to Grand Lake and that western entrance to Rocky Mountain National Park. So instead of it becoming a new Outrider route, Winter Park's going to pick that up and they're going to fund it using their SB 230 dollars. So that's a nice success story for us. On the next slide, this is really kind of getting back to the dollars and cents. So last month we presented 2 scenarios to you. One that described the funding gap associated with continuing with current service levels and one that included that 5% growth allowance. We've also added 2 additional scenarios here for consideration. So that one on the top, we're calling that the preserve current service scenario. So that's the no action scenario. That would maintain the current routes and frequencies, but obviously that results in that budget gap that we talked about last year to the tune of about $25 million per year. The 5% growth scenario we presented last month is listed here as scenario 3. This would focus on system optimizations along with some targeted expansions on some of our high performing routes, along with potential targeted new service opportunities as well. So this would result in an approximately $28 million funding gap if we kind of maintained current service, but then allowed for about 5% growth. So scenario 1 would essentially turn back the clock and recalibrate our service to the currently available revenue levels of $22.5 million. This would result in significant service reductions across the whole system, but it would keep us operating in the black without any funding deficit. Scenario 2 is a bit of a middle ground between what we expect would be pretty draconian cuts in that scenario 1 option and the other scenarios that have the bigger budget shortfalls. We think this scenario would reduce our operating budget by about $5 to $10 million per year. And in this scenario, we would focus on optimizing all the routes while also doing some modest or revenue neutral investments in our highest performers. We would still have to cut some service, but it wouldn't be as severe as what we would have to do in scenario 1. And then I also noted at the bottom that we did present some one-time reallocation opportunities for fiscal year 27 last month, and those are absolutely still on the table. If those reallocations were approved by the commission, we could increase our available budget next year by about $21 million. So that would make that scenario 2 option very feasible to implement and still keeping us as well in striking distance of hitting some of those other scenarios as well. But again, that only solves our challenge for 1 year. We're right back in the same boat for fiscal year 28. This would only be a one-time reallocation opportunity. So with that, I will hand things over to Jeff, and he's going to talk us through the rest of the questions from last month. And Jeff should be-
Yep. Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right. Thank you. Sorry to be coming to you virtual today, but I've been battling a cold that I don't think you want to be exposed to. So last month we provided an overview of Bustang revenues and expenses and the forecasted funding gap. As Kay mentioned, we discussed some proposals to reallocate some existing CDOT funding as a short-term fix to help buy us some more time this upcoming fiscal year. And then we also discussed that while there are some short-term fixes, existing CDOT revenue sources really aren't able to provide long-term funding solutions. We also concluded the conversation last month, starting the conversation about the potential for a funding partnership with the CTIO. So this month, I'm going to back up just a little bit and dig a little bit deeper and provide an overview of the various CDOT and enterprise funding sources that have transit eligibility, as well as discuss some of the trade-offs and limitations associated with many of those funding sources. So I'm going to start off by with the CDOT funding sources. The majority of CDOT and enterprise funding sources have pretty narrowly prescribed purposes and eligibility established by state and federal statutes. So on the next few slides, I'll walk through each of the various state and federal funding sources that have transit eligibility and how those funding sources are or could be leveraged to support Bustang. So we'll start off here with federal sources flowing through CDOT. There are a couple of federal sources that do flow through CDOT that do have transit eligibility. The first are two programs called the STBG and carbon reduction. Both of these programs have transit eligibility. There's a portion that goes to the MPOs and there's a portion that goes to the state. The challenge with the STBG and carbon reduction programs are that those funds are limited to capital costs. And really, when we're talking about Bustang, the majority of both the total expenses as well as the funding gap itself is with operating funds. So while it's possible we could reallocate these funds, they're currently programmed to the CDOT Capital Construction Program, primarily 10-year plan and asset management. While they could be reallocated, the challenge again here is they're limited to capital, and that's really not the type of funding that we need to solve the Bustang funding gap. The CMAQ program is another federal program that does have some transit eligibility. CMAQ, does allow operating costs with some limitations, but the dollars are relatively small. There's only about $2 million a year of CMAQ that flows to CDOT as opposed to the MPOs. And we have already proposed that these funds be allocated to Bustang, both as part of the short-term funding solutions proposed and then on an ongoing basis. So CMAQ has some possibility, but again, that's already part of the strategy that we've identified. And it will help us in the short term. On an ongoing basis, it's about $2 million a year. So again, part of an overall package, but not large enough in size to really be a driving factor in closing the funding gap. Finally, the other federal programs with transit eligibility, which flow through CDOT, are the various FTA formula programs. A portion of the funding associated with the FTA 5311F program is already allocated to Bustang Outrider. And while there are some additional funds for which Bustang could be potentially eligible, these funds are all allocated currently to local transit grant programs. So trade-off there that I don't think is a trade-off we are interested in making at this point would be that for us to utilize any more of those FTA funds, it would have to come at the cost of local transit agencies. So to summarize here, with respect to the federal funds, again, really limited opportunities to use federal funds beyond what we are already using in the case of FTA or proposing to use in the case of CMAQ. So let's go to the next slide, and we'll move on to some of the CDOT state funds. There are 4 different state funding sources that flow through CDOT with transit eligibility. The first is a flexible general fund transfer that was put in place under Senate Bill 260 a few years ago. These transfers only began in fiscal year 25, and we received exactly one transfer before the legislature significantly cut those transfers in fiscal year 26 and fiscal year 27. So one big issue with general fund as a source of ongoing funding is that it is highly variable and not reliable. To the extent that we do receive general fund transfers, we are already utilizing general fund to participate in Bustang. In the current fiscal year 26, we actually allocated 10 million in general fund as part of a short-term strategies to buy more time. So we already made a significant commitment of general fund in the current fiscal year. Additionally, in the update to the 10-year plan, which the TC will be approving next month, we have planned 6 million annually to fund Bustang capital costs. So we basically built in a large part, if not all, of the ongoing capital costs into the 10-year plan, utilizing those general fund dollars. The balance of any general fund, to the extent that we do have general fund, is currently programmed to the 10-year plan, the CDOT capital construction program. So to the extent that we were to tap into general fund any further, despite the limitations on us receiving those funds in the first place, it would come as a trade-off with projects in the 10-year plan. So moving on, HUTF, the HUTF, or Highway User Tax Fund, is our primary source of flexible state transportation funds. The majority of HUTF revenue, however, cannot be used for transit. There is one HUTF revenue stream, the retail delivery fee, that does allow for transit uses. It is a small revenue stream in the context of the overall HUTF. And as of right now, it is part of our funding stream flowing to our maintenance and operations program. So that maintenance and operations program, MLS program, I will say our funding is already very tight for that program. So we're already facing a significant funding shortfall, I'd say, kind of maintaining basic levels of maintenance and operations, such as snow and ice removal and pothole repair, that while there is some limited transit eligibility, it would require reallocating for maintenance and operations, which I think is a recommendation we probably are not at a point that we would want to make right now. There are two other state funding sources with transit eligibility. That's the MMOF, Multimodal Options Fund, and Faster Transit. Both of these are already going to Bustang. In the case of the MMOF, 100% of the state share of the MMOF is dedicated to Bustang. In the case of Faster Transit, 6 million of the 15 million annually in Faster Transit revenues are already going to Bustang. The other 9 million of that Faster Transit revenue goes to staffing for the Division of Transit and Rail, and the rest goes out to local transit agencies through our transit grant programs. So again, limited there. The only opportunity to increase funding through Faster Transit would require taking it from local transit grant programs, which again is not a great trade-off. Let's go on to the next slide. So I'm going to move on. So moving on to the enterprise revenues. And actually, let's go back once. Sorry, one other point I wanted to make. Let's go back a slide for a second. So one other funding source I wanted to mention before we move on to the enterprise funding sources. You didn't see listed on here the Transportation Commission Program Reserve, and I wanted to take just a minute to talk about that. I've heard a few comments about, well, can't we just use the TC Program Reserve to fund Bustang? So first, the TC Reserve is not a funding source. It's a program that is funded primarily through the revenue reconciliation process. So that means that when actual revenues come in higher than forecasted, we're able to put some of those funds into the TC Reserve, and they are set aside to address unanticipated needs. So this is really a pot of funds that are set aside to address unanticipated needs. It's not really an ongoing source of program funding. So the reserve is potentially a short-term funding source, which we could potentially tap into, and that might be something we consider in fiscal year 27 to close any remaining funding gap. But it's really not an ongoing funding source that I think would offer an ongoing solution to the Bustang funding gap. Additionally, I'll note that the program reserve is largely funded with federal funding and HUTF, and so it faces the same limitations that I walked through with those sources. The HUTF funds generally aren't eligible for transit, and the federal funds in the program reserve are largely limited to capital. So even setting aside the concern that the program reserve isn't really a good long-term sustainable source, it's really even limited as a short-term source by the fact that the eligibility under HUTF and federal funds, generally speaking, is very limited for transit operations. So with that, let's move on to the enterprise funding sources. So just a couple of slides here to speak about the various funding streams with transit eligibility flowing through the enterprises. The first non-attainment area air pollution mitigation enterprise. So it's a mouthful. The NAPME receives revenues through the retail delivery and rideshare fee revenue. There are some significant limitations, however. First, its use is limited to the Front Range air quality non-attainment area, so it can only fund things within that non-attainment area. Another limitation with NAPME revenues is that as a grant-making entity, this really wouldn't be a source of ongoing funding. It's rather something that CDOT could apply for and potentially periodically receive awards, but it's really not an ongoing source of revenue we could rely on. I'll also note, without getting into detail here, there are also some TABOR issues with CDOT being an applicant for funding through the NAPME. The Clean Transit Enterprise does have transit eligibility. However, Bustang is generally not eligible under funding for the Clean Transit Enterprise, as both of those programs operated by CTE are statutorily focused on local transit, which Bustang is not, or to passenger rail, which again, Bustang is not. So again, CTE does have some transit revenues, but unfortunately, they are not sources for which Bustang generally would be eligible. So let's go on to the next slide. And I think this is the final slide speaking to transit sources with eligibility. And I will also invite Piper to jump in here because this is where we kind of transition to CTIO, which is really kind of where we took the conversation last month, indicating that potentially the best fit was to look at some of the revenue sources flowing through CTIO. I kind of walked you through the other revenue sources that had a potential for transit funding. And as you could see, I think the message there is that they are really limited. And in many cases, where we do have the ability to use those other revenue sources, we either already are, or they're part of some of the recommendations we've made for short-term funding. So moving on to CTE, this is where we really think we have the most flexibility and opportunity for funding. CTIO has two funding sources, which have the potential for transit applications. I'll note that in the case of both of these funding sources, there are TABOR considerations that we would need to work through in terms of how a partnership would work, how ownership would work of a Bustang service. Not going to get into that now, but I do think it's important to point that out, that is one of the issues that we will have to navigate if we look to move forward with a funding partnership with CTIO. But looking specifically just at the two revenue sources, the first of these two sources is Senate Bill 24-184 congestion impact fee revenue, which is the daily vehicle rental fee. This source is statutorily dedicated to transit and rail and could be a potential source for partial Bustang funding. The limitation here is that this is also one of the primary sources of funding for front range passenger rail and mountain rail. And so that's not to say that this couldn't be part of a funding strategy. It very well may be a key element of a funding strategy, but it is also a source that has other demands, namely front range passenger rail and mountain rail projects. And then finally, the other source of revenue, which we briefly discussed last month, is toll revenue. There's the potential for toll revenue to be utilized to support Bustang, subject to existing corridor restrictions and the availability of that revenue after accounting for debt service, maintenance and operations, and other planned corridor projects. And again, I think this is, along with the congestion impact fee, is the other source of funding with CTIO that we are proposing we explore further with the CTIO board and the Transportation Commission. So I think I'm going to pause here and see if Piper, with the chair's permission, Piper, anything you want to jump in on this slide, since we are talking about your board and your funding streams.
Go ahead, Piper.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. No, honestly, I think you hit the high points, but I'm happy to answer CTIO related questions as we get into the discussion. Thanks, Jeff.
Okay. Thank you. And I think there's just one more slide in our deck today. And if you want to go to that final slide, and maybe we can just wrap up with the presentation portion briefly, and then I think Kay, Piper, and I'd be happy to take any questions or to take any feedback. Obviously, this is an ongoing conversation. Today's discussion sort of cues us up for another discussion next month, where we'll likely start to get into more specifics of the actual funding strategy. I think I'd anticipate additional follow-up next month, as well as some continuing ongoing engagement with stakeholders. We'll also likely be back for action next month on some of the short-term funding actions we discussed in February, so expect that. And then again, number of questions that we'll continue to engage with the Attorney General's office on legal questions, path forward, Tabor considerations, et cetera, that we hope to be able to bring you more information on in months ahead. So I will wrap there and hand it back to the chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, we are looking for questions right away. Commissioner Parsons, go ahead, please.
Thank you, everybody, for that presentation. It's super helpful. Jeff, I have a quick question just about CMAQ. You mentioned it was already reallocated, the roughly $2 million a year. What was it reallocated from?
So, and actually, it has not already been reallocated. It was part of what we proposed last month as potential for reallocation. So there is there's about $2 million a year in the CMAQ program that is currently allocated to electric vehicle infrastructure. There's actually a large balance of those funds from the last few years. We worked with the commission to dedicate them to that purpose several years ago. Right at about the same time, a number of other funding sources came into play, and so ultimately those funds have not been utilized in the way that was originally intended. We have not repurposed them to this point, in part because we were eyeing them as a potential funding source for Bustang. So that would be one of the actions coming up potentially as early as next month, where we would ask you to consider pointing those dollars to Bustang, but they are not currently allocated to that purpose.
Commissioner or Vice Chair Bowman, please.
Thank you. I just have a quick question for my own edification. When I went through the expenses for Outrider, Pegasus, and administration were excluded. So I'm just wondering, how much more are those? I'm just out of curiosity.
Yeah, so in terms of, I've realized those weren't in the slides. Let me see if I've got that handy. So the Outrider costs are about $7 million a year. Pegasus about $5 million, seasonal services about $500,000.
And I'm sorry, admin?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
Oh, okay. Outriders
Admin
7, Pegasus is 5.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thanks. I just wondered. Thank you. Appreciate that, Kay.
Go ahead, Commissioner Parsons.
Thank you. Also, I was thinking about the mobility hubs. I think early in the slide, you talked about the mobility hubs in the North Front Range, kind of adding to the efficiencies, which is great. But I'm curious, do the operating costs for the mobility hubs come out of Bustang operations, or is that paid for separately somewhere else?
So that's part of our overall budget, but we broke it out separately as part of just so you could see the differentiation between like what the actual north, south, west and the mobility hubs would cost. So.
Okay, so those are in there, but just not in those little sections.
Yeah, and it's managed as a statewide contract, so it's not like we don't attribute a Northline mobility hub to a Northline expense. We have it separate as a maintenance cost. For
Yeah, that makes total sense. I was just thinking about, because there was one of the stops that we have in Colorado Springs, which was not a mobility hub, so it is a totally different situation, was managed by the city. I wasn't sure how those were managed in the ones that you mentioned.
Yeah, and they're kind of a case-by-case basis. In some cases, we have maintenance agreements with the locals. In some cases, we maintain them ourselves. So yeah, that's why we break them out separately, because it's really hard to allocate them by corridor.
Barbara Bowman, please go.
I have just one more question, Kay. Who's the current contractor for Outrider?
So Outrider has a variety of contractors.
Okay,
So in many cases, it's the near local transit agency that's running it. In some cases, it's ACE has some of those routes as well.
okay.
But right now it's a mixture. I think we might have like 9 different people. Don't quote me on that, but it's a mixture.
Okay, and then are you looking in the RFPs, are you looking at consolidating to one contractor, or are you still looking at operating with local contractors?
Yeah, so we're developing that RFP right now, and I think we're looking at a variety of options where
Okay.
either someone could propose all the routes,
Okay,
or people could bid on individual routes. We haven't quite finalized it yet, but we want to provide as many options as possible so that we can get the best cost as possible.
okay, thank you.
Commissioner Jones?
Thanks for that great presentation. I have a couple of general questions about the initial portion where you went through sort of the benefits of transit, which was excellent. I'm curious if there's a calculation or sort of an average estimate for the role of transit in making an overall transportation corridor more effective and efficient in terms of managing congestion in a sustainable fashion. Because you often have the conversation with people who drive cars, well, I don't use the transit. You're like, okay, but everybody benefits, and you alluded to that. But I wondered, sort of as you think about the overall investment in a transportation corridor for cars, transit users, and everybody in the corridor, have you put a number or a figure around the role of transit in that effectiveness?
That's a really interesting project, and we would love like a PhD dissertation on this because we think that's the level, that's like the level of analysis I think we need. We do actually have a research project going right now with DTD that's going to try to get at some of that. But I don't have a number for you right now, but there's a lot of factors, as we mentioned, and how you quantify those positive externalities into the operating costs, into the benefits experienced by drivers. It's a really interesting question.
Okay, I have another PhD dissertation for somebody else. So we often talk about farebox recovery and how transit doesn't pay its own way. And then the response will be, well, neither do car drivers. Has anybody calculated what the equivalent farebox recovery of car drivers is in terms of, because obviously we're not keeping up with the maintenance of our roads and we're out of attainment with ozone. I mean, there's a lot of things that aren't paid for. I'm just curious if there's an equivalent calculation in terms of recovery of taxes and like HETF through the gas tax and other things.
If there is, we'd love to get our hands on it. Like every time we talk to people about this, we're like, have you ever considered like calculating this number or doing this research? And I think a lot of people are interested in it, but it's a very complex calculation with a lot of assumptions. So I think we're interested in it, and we're kind of maybe nipping at the edges of it with some of the stuff we're doing. I think one of the other challenges we have is that we haven't been running at the expanded service levels for very long, so we don't have great longitudinal data. I think a lot of the data is very context specific. You'll notice that from like the slide on APTA says it's 1 to 5 and MIT says it's 1 to 13. So the context definitely matters. So I don't know that there's really like a national number that would be accurate for individual locations. And we don't have a ton of longitudinal data yet on our expanded service levels to really get to that calculation in a robust way yet, but we're really interested in it.
Calling all you potential PhDs.
Hint, hint.
So I had 2 more Bustang specific, and maybe this is directed to Piper. As I'm out talking to folks in District 4 about Bustang and toll revenues and that kind of stuff, the response, as you would expect, would be, so is there enough money to cover the project itself, the managed lane project, and Bustang, and how much is left over to look at Bustang elsewhere? And really, do we have those numbers yet, or when will we have those numbers? Because it's kind of a understandable response and kind of a basic question that we will need to answer.
That's one for Piper.
Sure. No, appreciate the question, and board members feel free to chime in. We actually we held our meeting right before this, and we had a really robust discussion on how we're going to support the 10-year plan projects that we all participated in a joint workshop on in January. So specifically, I presented what I think my recommended strategy to the board is going to be to complete the I-25 corridor. And really what I heard from my board throughout the various times that they've heard about these projects is they're committed to the express lanes network and completing the I-25 corridor while finding a strategy that still balances leaving flexibility for future projects, whatever those may be. And so what the board saw and kind of gave the thumbs up on was really a strategy that does that for I-25. And it does show that we will have we can complete the project, and how we're going, what the financing scenario and approach is that we're going to start implementing, and then what that would mean for essentially corridor flexibility moving forward for the next 10 years. So I think it would be worth Herman maybe just making sure the TC has that, but would add, open it up to maybe any of the other board members. I think we're actively wrestling with that. And I think what was presented publicly at our meeting definitely will get at some of that for I-25. For I-270, the project is just in a different place. And so I think my recommended next steps to my board was we need updated information to even understand what the financing capacity and scenarios might be that we want to pursue to make some of those policy decisions. We have pretty outdated traffic and revenue data for the I-270 corridor. It's over 5 years old, which in a TNR world means it's kind of useless because Central 70 was not open at that time. Just traffic conditions are changing. So my recommended strategy, at least for I-270, given where we are today, was that we just need new information in order to even make informed decisions on what revenue's potential is and how we would want to utilize that revenue, again, to get at the board's goal of a balance of supporting the express lanes network, supporting the 10-year plan, but also ensuring that we have flexibility for future, policy decisions or programs and, needs that the board wants to implement.
Could I ask a follow-up to that? Then for 270, Bustang doesn't flow in that. So you're just talking sort of more flexibility in general for that
Yes.
balance?
Yes.
That would transcend, but okay. You had a follow, I have one last question and then.
Actually,
Yeah.
Commissioner Marcano next and then Commissioner McLaughlin. Yeah.
Do I get to answer?
Yeah,
this?
go ahead.
Okay, sorry.
I just wanted to establish.
I don't mean to monopolize. So the other question that comes up when you're talking to folks in District 4 about this question is if the toll revenues are to flow outside of the corridor, the question is, well, what is the benefit to people in the I-25 corridor? And I'm curious if we have data that talks about how different corridors benefit from Bustang in different corridors. I assume, I don't know how granular we have about who uses the I-25 corridor and if they also use the I-70 corridor and, what's the benefit. But just trying to understand the case that one might make for sort of, if you're not inclined to just spend statewide, what's the direct benefit between those users in different corridors?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I would definitely look to Kay to see what kind of at least Bustang information we have, but at least from the express lanes user standpoint, we know that roughly 30% of people that drive on I-25 also use the express lanes on I-70, right? They are treating it as a network. So that's sort of the data point that we have currently to show that, drivers on I-25 are taking trips, on South Gap, on C-470, on I-70. So at least from a tolling perspective, we know that 30-ish% of drivers are treating it more from a network standpoint. But I would maybe defer to Kay to add any points around how Bustang layers on top of that. That would sort of be data you probably have.
Yeah, and I think just by how our main lines are set up, we have one that goes north, one that goes south, one that goes west, right? We don't have one that goes northwest or, southeast or anything, right? So we really use Union Station as our hub. And if people do want to transfer from the North Line to the West Line, they would transfer through Union Station. But we don't have any routes that, that make those turns, right? Everyone would connect in Union Station and connect to a different service.
Commissioner Marcano, thanks for your patience.
Thank you, Chair Cook. So first I have a follow-up on that point because I find that 30% figure interesting. Are these individual users or are they like more business commercial users? Like if someone has a sponsored, tag, for example?
Good question. Yeah, because we obviously have the opportunity for people to create a fleet account,
Mhm.
if you had a fleet of, electrician trucks or something like that. I don't know the answer. I'll ask. The hard part is right now, CTIO isn't really a lot of the owner of we're not the owner of the data. If you hold an express toll account, it is owned by E470. So these are not CTIO owned accounts. So this is kind of data that we're getting on our specific roadway. So it is tied to an account, if that makes sense. And we don't own those accounts today. So this is sort of just data that we're getting on where people's transponders or tags are moving. So I don't know off the top of my head if we would even have that information on if this tag is tied to a fleet car versus a single occupant, a regular driver. But I will certainly ask. Yeah.
Yeah, I would love to get that. And just to clarify, so all of our toll lanes are also managed by the same private, I think, Australian company that owns 470?
No, well, they're all owned and operated by CTIO. We essentially just contract with
With them.
E470 to just do the processing, the billing, the customer service piece.
Okay.
Yes.
But
But
it
we
is
are
the same-
collecting all of the dollars.
Gotcha, but it is
Yeah.
the same entity though, that's helping you all do that.
Yeah,
Okay,
because we have a
cool.
business, we have a contract and a business relationship with
Okay.
them. So if we ask for information on sort of like users on our lanes or, we do receive regular data and if that's what you're asking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, cool, thank
Yeah,
you.
the E470 Public Highway Authority.
All right, thank you. So I do have several other little points here. So I guess going back to the system optimization. So I know that you mentioned here that we're going to put out new RFPs for Outriders. How many qualified operators actually exist in Colorado?
Well, I think just about any transit agency would be a qualified operator. And there are, 60 of those. There's also private companies. So I think that's why we put it out to RFP, because anyone who feels like they're qualified would be able to apply.
Okay, great. And do we have a breakdown of like how many public versus private, operators submit?
Well, we haven't issued the RFP yet, so.
I'm saying like historically too.
I would have to check on that. I
Okay.
don't know.
Quite cool. I think that would just be interesting to know. And yeah, I just want to say that this was a fantastic presentation. I just want to thank you all for the time and the effort to put it together. And I also want to echo the kind of request from a couple of my colleagues. I'd love to see similar cost kind of comparisons for all modes of transportation, honestly, like bicycle lanes, rail, automobile, centered infrastructure, because we need to. I feel like in some ways, without knowing like a similar kind of like analysis of like the, positive externalities and also negative externalities per user, we're kind of stabbing in the dark a little bit about like how we're actually prioritizing our funding for transportation infrastructure in the state. And, one thing that we all know is that there's not enough funding to address our existing roads, highways. We're doing what we can with enterprises. But there are very strict rules that govern those, so we can't really run deficits. They have to be self-sustaining, and we're limited in how we can supplement them. So one thing that I would submit for everybody's consideration is that without knowing these negative externalities, right, as well, we're not able to really hold accountable the players that contribute to generating them, right? Or maybe even in some cases benefit from generating those because it supports like their bottom line while putting more of the responsibility on the general public and the traveling public to kind of pick up that. So I think it's really important that we get some of this research done. I'm not sure off rip what exists out there. I know that there are smaller little studies that some folks have had. I'm the kind of guy that goes home and reads white papers for fun. So I can try to consolidate some of that and send it if it would be helpful. But yeah, we need to be able to like have, a local baseline, I think, that's more directly related to Colorado so that we can talk dollars and actually like determine what makes sense right, for our communities here. So just strongly want to echo that request for that information. So thank you all.
Commissioner McLaughlin and then Vice Chair Bowman.
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation. That was really great. There's a few bills that come out of the legislature that the money is directed to a certain area. Are those efficient, or do we need amendments to say the money could be going to several different places of need instead of a place that at the time had a lot of need but may not as much now? And I don't think that's a PhD anything, but yeah.
No, and I don't know if Jeff wants to jump in since he has to manage all these pots of money, but I would say that politically, that would be very hard, I think, that because when it was put there to protect it. And I'm not sure there's much political will to change that because especially, I think you might be going with expanding some of the road dollars to transit. And that is probably not going to be something that would get through the legislature.
Yeah,
And
I'm
perhaps it's
sorry.
also,
Oh, yeah.
No, I was just gonna say, I'm sorry, I couldn't quite hear the question.
it was so good, I'm not sure I can repeat it again. The legislation that goes through often, the money is directed to one particular area or project. And I'm going to add in there, I'm talking kind of more regional maybe than transportation to transit. And I'm just wondering if those dollars are efficient now, or they were at the time that the bill was passed, and if there's amendments that we need to ask to be put on to maybe spread that money in different areas.
So yeah, I would say that most of our transportation revenue is fairly prescribed statutorily. We don't have a lot of flexibility in use in terms, when I went through the transit eligibility slide a few slides ago, right, that you can see that there's actually very limited sources of transportation revenue that has transit identified as an eligible source. On the highway side, we face other sets of limitations where we have dollars that are prescribed for particular purposes like bridges that can't be used for roads, et cetera. So, in terms of answering the question, is it efficient? I mean, I will tell you from the perspective of being able to manage funds, I would love to see our funding have a greater degree of flexibility and allow the department and the governing bodies, the Transportation Commission, to have more ability than we have to make some of those determinations and to assess those trade-offs. I think maybe to Sally's point, that's easier said than done from a legislative perspective. I think legislators, very often want to make sure that dollars are going to exactly that particular thing that they're most interested in, and that they have guardrails to guard against whatever it is that they are concerned about how those funds will be used. But I will say our funding in general across CDOT and the enterprises lacks a lot of fungibility, and that creates challenges in a lot of different ways. So I'm not sure if that answers the question, but if nothing else, you get to hear me opine a little bit on the need for greater flexibility.
And that's all I was looking for. Thank you.
He handed that to you. Okay, Vice Chair Bowman, please. Go ahead.
I have a 30,000-foot question, and that is, are there any statewide systems that are similar? Are there any in the U.S. that cover themselves, expenses completely from the Farebox?
No, there's definitely none that cover their expenses through Farebox.
Okay, just wondered. Okay,
I
thank
think
you.
that's probably globally too. I don't think there are any.
Just to piggyback on that, Commissioner Jones and I were at the Dr. Cog meeting, and Regional Air Quality Council head Mike Silverstein asked that same question. He was concerned more from a communication standpoint that the way people maybe responded to recent reporting on the Bustang was that there was an expectation that it would pay its own way, or it should be paying its own way. And of course it doesn't, and neither do the road taxes and things like that. So anyway, just passing that along. Commissioner Parsons, go ahead, please.
Thank you. This is more of a clarification for Piper, but it falls in that line because thinking about the toll revenue has been a source of revenue. So there are not very many of those. When you say the board is committed to I-25, is that the existing projects or does that include expansion through I-25? As you know, I don't know if everybody knows, but we've talked about doing a rev study through the current South Gap goes to Monument, which is, still a fair bit north of Colorado Springs. So we've looked at seeing if there's a way to do express lane potential revenue study in case there's the ability to collect revenue through that, or kind of our more congested areas that again continues to be a source of something that can be used. So I was just curious about the future planning of that.
No, I appreciate the question. We actually did talk about that at our board meeting, just kind of the follow-up that we've had with Director Sacraponte and the Pikes Peak area cog down there. The lens on the presentation the board had today was specifically on the 10-year plan of projects that you all were presented with. So it was really the I-25 North, completing the I-25 North corridor suite of projects. But just to kind of elaborate a little bit more on what Commissioner Parsons is referencing, the CTIO board received a request through one of our directors, Gina Sacraponte, she's probably listening online, who represents the Pikes Peak area to help really look at, given how successful I-25 South Gap has been, are there opportunities for our board to invest some dollars in studying expansion of those lanes? How could we support future projects? And I know we've been working with Shane Ferguson and his team on sort of just at least providing some information on a high level, like how CTIO could support, how potentially we could use South Gap revenues. So we weren't looking at that today. It was really more focused on the 10-year plan suite of projects that had a nexus to CTIO. So it was really more focused on I-25 North today, since that was part of the 10-year plan discussion.
Okay, we have Commissioner Gutierrez online, please.
Thank you. I really appreciate all of the additional information that we had been asking for being addressed in this presentation. Some very interesting data and really what I really appreciated was that you presented the 4 different scenarios. What happens with the 4 different scenarios, and I think that was part of what I was looking for. The one piece that was missing that I had asked for was a 10-year lookout, because when we looked at this last month, we only went to fiscal year 30, and I think and if I looked at this correctly, we were looking at a 5% growth, but then there's also added in there a 4%. I'm going to guess cost escalation for a variety of reasons why cost would go up. So it's really a 9% per year, and it's year over year. And I think when we do these kinds of escalations, the year over year kind of really tax on significant dollars as we go out. So I didn't see a 10-year lookout. So I did it. I put the numbers together based on using the same formula that you all used to show us to 30 fiscal year 30, and I think the
Commissioner, I think Kay can respond to that. Can we cut in right quick? I'm sorry.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I apologize that we didn't provide a 10-year forecast, and I can give the reason why we did not. So one of our major cost associated with operating the service is our operating contract, and state procurement code only allows us to enter into those agreements for periods of 5 years. So we really only have confidence on our biggest cost for 5 years in the future. We do not have a good sense of what the cost for operations will be in 4 more years when we have to recompete that contract. So we didn't feel like we could give you a number with a straight face, knowing that the biggest cost is unknown in 5 years. So.
And go ahead, Commissioner Gutierrez.
Yeah, and I think that just actually even adds to my concern, quite frankly, that I think we have to be careful when we program and specifically say we're going to do so. And that's my caution, that we're saying we're going to build this program on a 5% growth. And I think we've got to evaluate that more often than just putting it out there categorically. Because quite frankly, when I did do the math, and I understand what you just told me about that contract, but by 10 years, by the time we get to 2038, our deficit is almost $80 million. So I would hate to put us in a position of saying, yeah, we really support this 5% growth, and which I do, by the way, but I think we've got to be very careful that we don't set ourselves up for future failure, even worse than where this fiscal cliff that we're facing right now. And that's my comment on that. And that's the reason for asking for that 10-year plan. I think we need to be very fiscally aware of where this can lead us. And then finally, I think where I am really going to suggest we really take a look at is that Senate Bill 184 money. And the reason I say that, this morning we got a presentation from the Mountain Rail, and it looks like within a few short months, we'll have a much better handle on the numbers. I think by fall, I'm based on the presentations we've received, we're going to have better numbers on the Denver Union Station to Fort Collins, and I really think we ought to focus in on that here once we have those numbers, because I think that is. If I look at the projections that we received on SB 184 revenues, by 2050, we're going to be at $110 million annually. There's a significant growth there, and I know those are projections, and I understand projections, but I really think maybe I would really ask that the next meeting we focus and look at some of those numbers on SB 184 and how those might be used more efficiently. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, we're running really late, but I want everybody to have a crack at it. Go ahead, Commissioner Ritter.
Just out of curiosity, can we sell sponsorships such that our buses look like something out of NASCAR? Or go to one of these legal firms if you want to avoid an accident, ride Bustang. Apparently, according to your slide, that's what you do. But if you do get an accident, you call me. I'd just like to get a better idea if there's private enterprise that can invest in this in some kind of advertising vehicle. We got these cars going up and down the highway. Some of us occasionally use billboards to raise name ID and things like that. Can we get some cash for that?
Yep. RTD does that. And so if we're adding ideas to the hopper, I've got a couple, 3 myself, if that's all right, then we'll wrap up. Okay, Commissioner or Director Moran, Vice Chair Moran.
Thank you. I just wanted to chime in and say that I appreciate Chair Gutierrez, or I guess, is he a commissioner in this setting? Commissioner Gutierrez's comments. I do think it would be valuable to take a look at $184, but I would also reiterate that I think from the CTIO, I'll speak for myself, but I think other board members as well continued to see value in having this conversation about flexibility in toll revenue. So fully support the idea of looking at 184, but would also encourage us to continue sort of a dual track approach here to understand what flexibility might be possible for us.
Thank you. And I'll add my own. I don't expect a response, just some thoughts. One is you already are doing this with Outrider, but you're kind of outsourcing some of the operation to local communities, maybe nonprofits or something there. Can they in turn access the 230 money to operate one of our services or a similarly branded service that just does what we did? So that's one thing to explore. Another one is pricing. I don't know how you approach pricing, but I remain convinced that there might be ways to squeeze a little bit more revenue out of the out of the runs that you have through pricing. And I know, for example, that we have tapped folks at the Taubman Center for help with the e-vehicles and stuff. They're heavy on economics out at the K school. So I would say if you can tap some of that to see what you might do to maximize your fare box and meet other aims as well, that would be great. And that's all for, so we're half hour, and with apologies for everybody who's waiting for the next item. So we'll go ahead and move on. But first, I'll turn it over to Chair Gutierrez to adjourn the CTIO meeting.
Thank you. With no further business to come before the CTIO board, we stand adjourned. Thank you, Chair Cook. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you, Chair Gutierrez. Okay, so next on the agenda, and thank you all very much for good presentation. Good. You can see how much interest there was in that. Next, we have the Pueblo Area Council of Governments GHG Transportation Report. This is Darius Pakbas and Eva Kosleon. I hope I said it right.
You did, Chair Cook.
Good.
Pursuant to Rule 2 CCR 60122, the Pueblo Area Council of Governments is going to present their GHG transportations. This is the last MPO to present their report. This is going to be up for adoption tomorrow. So I'm going to turn it over to Eva Kosleon, who is the Executive Director of the PACOG, and she is going to take over the presentation from here. So Eva, take it away.
Thank you, Darius, and thank you, Board, for having me today. And as Darius mentioned, my name is Eva Kosleon. I am the MPO Manager for the Pueblo Area Council of Governments, and I'm here today to provide a summary of our greenhouse gas transportation report. I will review some of the plans, projects, policies, and data that supported our compliance with the required GHG reductions per Colorado Code of Regulation 60122. Next slide, please. So a brief overview of the MPO area. We have 152,000 residents and a little over 347 square miles. Our main metropolis areas are the City of Pueblo and Pueblo West Metro District. We also have smaller areas such as Glen, Devine, Baxter, Bragdon, Lombard Village, and Pinon. Next slide. So I want to highlight some areas and get you familiar with the Pueblo MPO area. As I mentioned, our two larger metro areas are Pueblo West, just to the west, that's shown in the orange, and then we also have the purple, which is the City of Pueblo. We have I-25 running north and south through the City of Pueblo, and we have US 50 running east to west through Pueblo West and the City of Pueblo. We also have the Arkansas River and Fountain Creek that run through our communities. And I bring up these elements because they pose both challenges and opportunities for our transportation system. Next slide. So as you all know, we're updating our long-range transportation plan, and the purpose of updating our long-range plan is to create a realistic 25-year long vision of our transportation system. We created a vision statement around public input, which is our region is brought together through a connected, safe, multimodal, and accessible system. Next slide. So we've been working on this process for a little bit over a year. We started out really strong and did a lot of public engagement, from having a summit to going to Pueblo Pride and having focus groups, and then we started collecting data and updating our models, our traffic counts, everything to make sure that it's looking at what's happening now. And then we started developing our different performance plans. We identified aspirational projects, and also, as required, our plan is fiscally fiscal. We identified fiscal restraint and conformity as per FHWA, and we're towards the end of the process. We're going to be going to our Transportation Advisory Board here in the next month and the PACOG Board for adoption. And of course, we're here today to present to you, and tomorrow have our hearing. Next slide. So a lot has changed over the last 5 years from the 2045 plan to now the 2050 plan. A lot of updates in different plans from the area council of governments to the county and transit. And I'll go into a little bit of each of these different plans, but really a lot of these local plans that were updated include a greater focus on denser, more compacted land use, multimodal transportation, improved transit service and amenities, and also protecting our vulnerable road users. Next slide. So a lot of the work that the MPO has done within the last 5 years is we started really working towards a Complete Streets initiative. Back in January, we hosted a peer exchange with Las Cruces and Tucson. We had engineers and planners come and talk about their Complete Streets implementation to give us an idea of how to better implement those policies into our community. We also built a roundabout campaign. We have several new roundabouts in our community, and so we thought it would be a great opportunity to educate the residents of how to thoroughly ride and drive through a roundabout. And we're also going to be updating our bicycle pedestrian master plan. This will identify infrastructure and policy improvements and modifications which would make the bicycle and trail network safer, more extensive, and encourage the use of cycling as an everyday mode of transportation. The city received several grants in the last 5 years. A few of them are the city received a RAISE grant for a little over $16 million. Part of the project is to design a 24th Street bridge that will go over the railroad tracks. This will provide better connectivity to the city's of Pueblo's West Side community. A study will be conducted to identify a new corridor that will provide more direct access to downtown. This will give residents shorter routes to places of employment, schools, and other community amenities. This study will also incorporate multimodal transportation. The city also got a Safe Streets for All 2022 grant, and with that, they conducted and created the Comprehensive Safety Action Plan. This is a very thorough plan. I looked over 951 intersections and 388 road segments. Through different analysis and screening, they came up with 69 safety improvements and 192 safety motivated infrastructure and operational improvements. And because of their partnership with CDOT and other entities in our region, they've already started implementing smaller projects such as backplate installation and signal retiming. Next slide. So Pueblo Transit has also done quite a bit of work in the last 5 years to help with these reduction levels. They received a $15 million grant to eventually transition their entire fleet to diesel and electric hybrid. They also had areas of persistent poverty. This was a study that demonstrates the need for extended transit service to access employment areas such as the airport, large industrial areas in our community. And they also created different shopping routes. The north and south shopping routes were developed in the summer of 24. This created routes that transferred riders easier to key shopping areas in our community. This reduced headways from an hour to 30 minutes, and in some locations less. They're also working on a ride app, and this will help riders plan out their routes, their transfers, and know their bus in real time. They have also been working with local partners to get students K through 12 to ride for free. They've been doing this for the last 5 years with a steady increase throughout the years. Last year, they also did a Veterans Ride Free and are continuing to do that as well. And also part of the city's RAISE grant, they're also going to be getting 11 new bus stops, and 56 existing transit stops will be upgraded in Pueblo's West Side. Next slide. Pueblo County has done a lot of work as well. One of their larger projects that they've done in the last 5 years is the Medal of Honor Boulevard. This is a new roadway that will connect Pueblo West to the city of Pueblo, and I'll get into that a little bit more in the highlight. They also received a RAISE grant, and their RAISE grant will be able to construct the Medal of Honor multimodal trail, which is going to run parallel with the actual boulevard. This project also includes updating of some trailheads, building some mobility hubs, and also having access to a new water parks that is located on our Arkansas River, and also creating better connectivity for transit and expansion of the transit system to the Medal of Honor Boulevard. Next slide. So as I mentioned, the Pueblo County has built the Medal of Honor Boulevard, and this is a snapshot of the Medal of Honor Boulevard, and they're hoping to open it in a few days. That's the word anyway. And this will actually really help commuters who are going from Pueblo West to the city of Pueblo. Currently, Highway 50 is the main route to get to and from. And if there's a crash, it's very congested. Even on a regular day, it's very congested. So this will relieve a lot of congestion, and it'll also support shorter trips to people who will want to go to the west side of the city of Pueblo or south side of Pueblo. Next slide. Another project that was completed within the last 5 years is the I-25 and Dillon Drive flyover. This project is located on our north side, and this reliable freeway access is important because it supports the overall performance of the regional network. By addressing bottlenecks on I-25, the project reduces pressure on parallel local roads and improves travel time reliability. That reliability is foundational for successful transit operations, freight movement, and future multimodal investments that are assumed in our long-range transportation plan greenhouse gas compliance. Next slide. Another project that I'd like to highlight is the Pueblo River Trails Master Plan that the county adopted a couple of years ago. This identifies multimodal connections from existing trails to trails in eastern Pueblo County and Blend and Divine. Next slide. Land use also had a lot of changes in the last 5 years. In 2022, the Pueblo Regional Comprehensive Plan was adopted. It includes elements in the development plan that allows for greater density and mixed use within the city's urban core and along arterial and collector streets. The city also adopted zoning code amendments to comply with state strategic growth legislation. HB 241152 allows for existing neighborhoods to substantially increase in density without substantial redevelopment. Greater neighborhood density incentivizes local commercial development, bringing areas closer together, and reduces trips. HB 241304 incentivizes urban mixed-use redevelopment and reuse, revitalizing existing neighborhoods and increases density near transit stops. Transit located in dense neighborhoods has increased potential to capture local ridership. They are also updating their zoning and subdivision code to create a unified development code, the UDC. Then part of the UDC will rework parking rates to be closer to modern estimates and increases the emphasis on multimodal facilities such as bike parking and transit infrastructure. Next slide, please. So within the land use, high density and mixed use development has increased. Pikes Peak Park is an example of mixed use development. This residential and commercial development is a little over 73 acres. It's intended to facilitate multi-use development such as commercial services, access to childcare, healthcare services, food access services, restaurant, offices that will support a walkable neighborhood. This type of mixed-use development will reduce trip and encourage mode shift by having daily services incorporated into the plan. Next slide. This is another example of mixed-use development. This is also located on our west side. A lot of activity is happening on our west side. This is the Pueblo Springs apartment and Kaiser Permanente. Both are very near different amenities such as YMCA and Teletech College and other medical offices. The extension of Sun Mountain Boulevard that will run very close nearby will provide better connectivity to this development from downtown, existing trails, bike routes, and the transit system. Next slide. They've also been doing infill and adaptive reuse. This is an example of a couple of these. The St. Patrick's Church is an image on your left. It was constructed in 1882 and was repurposed into a pediatric therapy center in our Mesa Junction neighborhood. It was vacant for about 15 years prior to the renovation. The city's Historic Preservation Commission worked with the property owner to facilitate renovation and preserve the historic integrity of the church. The image on the right is newly renovated apartments above Fuller Rose Coffee in our downtown on Main Street. Infill developments such as these will reduce trip and encourage mode shift. Next slide. So there's been several businesses along West Pueblo Boulevard in the southern part of the city of Pueblo. These are just examples. We have Whataburger, Starbucks, in addition to a Chipotle that will be coming up. These businesses were a result of the comprehensive plan strategy to develop higher density and mixed use development along arterial and collector corridors. Next slide. So this is getting into a little bit of the data that went behind making sure that we met those reduction levels. We created a scenario builder, which is a tool we created to assess effects of policy and operational strategies on regional greenhouse gas emissions. 3 primary strategies were applied in the scenario builder: work from home participation by income level, transit frequency and speeds, non-motorized travel mode. These strategies were selected to represent feasible measures applicable within the PACOG region. A note on the work from home, it went beyond the full-time remote office work. It includes self-employed individuals, home-based businesses, part-time employment, non-standard work hours, and hybrid schedules of working from home at least 1 day per week. Next slide. So this slide represents the difference between what the baseline was and our updated plan and what a person trip mode share would look like. Overall, trip alone trips decrease, or drive alone trips decrease. Single occupancy driving is reduced in all future years. The shift is most noticeable in 2030 because the first implementation year. Then this effect becomes smaller in 2040, 2050 as travel patterns stabilize. Shared ride trips actually decrease. More people will be using other modes like transit and active transportation. Transit use grows gradually over time. Transit trips increase slightly in all future years. While the change is not dramatic, it shows a steady improvement in transit use as service and accessibility improve. Walking and biking see consistent growth. This is that active transportation. Non-motorized trips increase in all future years and is consistent change over time. Overall, shift is more sustainable. Taken together, these changes show travel shifting away from driving alone and toward transit, walking, and biking. Next slide. This is also another comparison. Note that the transit boardings in your packet are different from what is being presented today. We updated it, so what you're seeing on the screen is the actual updated and correct numbers. So I apologize for that. But as mentioned, this is a comparison from the baseline to our updated plan and what things look like. Total driving is actually reduced. VMT declines in all future years, reducing overall driving and reliance on automobiles over time. Driving per person decreases. VMT per capita drops, showing that the reduction in driving is due to behavior changes rather than population changes. Transit ridership increases. Transit boardings rise in all future years with large increases in 2030. This indicates an incremental increase in transit use over time. Changes are meaningful, but they're gradual. The updated plan improves system performance without causing major shifts in total travel demand, supporting gradual and realistic change. Next slide. So this slide shows the results of the scenarios that we incorporated into our new plan and how we meet the required reduction levels for 2030, 2040, and 2050. Next slide. So as I finish up my presentation, just to recap kind of what I went through is we're changing, our region is changing. The 2050 LRTP provides a fiscally constrained implementable roadmap for a safe, connected, and multimodal transportation system over the next 25 years. It reflects significant changes in land use policy, demographics, and state and federal requirements since the 2045 LRTP. We looked at what's changed. We looked at the local policy alignment, new comprehensive plans, safety action plans, complete streets, transit initiatives, and land use reforms. We also looked at the demographic shift, slower growth, and an aging population, reshaped travel needs and priorities. We also looked at all the transportation investments and major roadway, trail, and transit safety projects already underway across our region. Improved tools and data, updated our travel demand model with socioeconomic inputs, transit networks, and expanded greenhouse gas reporting. We also had the ability to test different reduction scenarios tied to real policy and operational strategies. Greenhouse performance and ongoing strategy, the updated plan better reflects current travel behavior and regional investments. Continued greenhouse gas reductions will depend on coordinated land use, transit investment, safety improvements, and implementation partnerships. So what's next? Hear back from you, have our public meeting, our board adoption will be set for April next month, and focus shifts from planning to implementation and performance tracking. Next slide. Thank you, Commission, for having me here today, and I will take any questions.
Thank you very much. And again, our apologies for the delay. Any questions or comments for Commissioner Hart, please.
Comments. My hat's off to Eva and her staff for doing this work. We're a pretty small community, you know, comparable to Grand Junction, and the greenhouse gas that comes out of our respective communities is fairly small, but it's still very critically important for the overall statewide plan that we're doing. But the difficulty with our smaller communities is identifying potential improvements that can help with those greenhouse gas issues. Not quite as easy as it is when you get into larger metropolitan areas and everything. So my hat's off to Eva for all the great work that she did. And then also for Darius and his staff for working very closely with us in the Pueblo area to help us work our way through this process. And I'm particularly thrilled with the presentation. I think it's just a wonderful presentation. And I'm also thrilled with some of the projects that Eva's identified that we're trying to tackle as we go forward. And there are many other projects that we'd like to tackle. When I moved to Pueblo originally from the Denver metro area, I didn't think I'd ever seen a town that had so much difficulty timing its lights because you literally stop at every stinking light going through town. And that's improved a little bit, but not much. And personally, I think that I'm hoping that we can continue working with our friends at the city of Pueblo and also the county of Pueblo to time those lights a little bit better. I think that that would be a huge improvement on our greenhouse gas contributions, but it's just a few comments.
Vice Chair Bowman, please.
Ava, are you working on that already? There you go. Thank you so much. What a wonderful presentation, and congratulations to you all. I loved reading this plan, and I want to comment that I'm so happy that you're doing more roundabouts in Grand Junction. We're known for our roundabouts, and they do work. But the roundabout education program is very important for safety. So really glad to see you're doing that. Also, congrats on the middle of Honor Boulevard to relieve congestion. Your multimodal trail is impressive. River Trails Master Plan, mixed-use development, and adaptive reuse. I just was so impressed with all of that. Thank you very much.
Commissioner Marcano, please.
Thank you, Chair Cook, and thank you, Ava, for the presentation. I was reading through this, and I'm going to be in Pueblo in a couple of weekends here, actually, so I'm looking forward to seeing some of these things in action. I want to echo the comments about the roundabouts. I had the opportunity to go to Carmel, Indiana, which is the roundabout capital of the United States, with an International Making Cities Livable conference a few years back, and that made me a roundabout evangelist. So very excited to see not just the roundabouts throughout the city, but also the teardrop roundabouts for the highway interchanges. Fantastic. I have a question about the some of the mixed use, higher density developments. I'm always really excited to see those. But I noticed that the transportation, adoption rate that you're expecting here is, not even 1%, right? It's like 0.3, 0.5, 0.5. Maybe I'm misreading this. But I'm just curious, are those services going to be online ahead of those developments coming online, or are they going to have a lag time? Because my concern is that we lose, ridership adoption if they come in after the fact, because people kind of get set in their transportation modes, So I'd like to just know a little more about that.
Yeah, thank you for the question. So I think Pueblo Transit is actively working with the city of Pueblo as those developments come on. And I think we're at a really good place because the city of Pueblo is updating their codes. And so having those new developments will make sure that they are addressing where those transit stops are. So I think having those discussions is really key in making sure that they're communicating. I know every Wednesday, the city of Pueblo, when they have an interested developer or someone coming in, they bring all the parties to the table to address these comments. So I think it's something that they're continually working on. I think it's just going to get better. I know that the Senate bill that is requiring less parking, I think that will help too. So I think there's a lot of things that are happening. It might not happen right away, but I think that we're making really good progress.
Right, thank you.
Thank you very much. And I would echo all the positive comments. I really appreciate the work that you've put into this and that our staff have brought to. This stuff you're doing is meaningful. I mean, really important, meaty stuff. And so I just wanted to recognize that. And we'll have this on our agenda tomorrow to make a finding of compliance with the state planning rule. And I want to really move on. So, okay. Thank you, Eva. Really appreciate it. Thank you, everybody involved. So now we'll move on to the condemnation authorization request for US 160, the Elmores East project. Let's see, we've got Keith Stefanik and Julie Constan.
Right. Well, thank you, commissioners. This agenda item is going to be a compilation between myself and Julie as we discussed a Region 5 project. But this ties back to last month we gave a condemnation proceeding 101 review to some of the new commissioners on how the right-of-way condemnation process works, what's required, and how we reach that point. So unfortunately, we're here again this month to talk about a project down in Region 5 that we have not been able to come to terms with the property owner. So the slide deck that we have prepared for today for this workshop will walk through the project, why we need these certain parcels, where we're at with negotiations with the landowner, and then ultimately tomorrow we'll have a resolution seeking approval to initiate and conduct condemnation proceedings for this property. So I'll turn it over to Julie to give a little bit of history on where this project's located and what this project is about.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Julie Constan, Region 5 Transportation Director. So this project is located on Highway 160 between the towns of Durango and Bayfield, which is one of our most highly trafficked corridors within the region, connecting Durango to the neighboring community of Bayfield, where we have a lot of affordable housing units and that type of work going on. This project, high level, we've been working on this project since the early 2000s, trying to widen the highway through here, knowing we've got more than enough traffic to have 4 lanes of highway through some of these sections. We did receive a grant through the INFRA program back in 2024. The Office of Secretary of Transportation did pause the grant funds for a little bit. We had about 57 million hung up, but thanks to some great partnerships with Club 20, Commissioner McLaughlin, And Representative Hurd's office, we just last week got word that all those funds are freed up. So thank you to all of our partners that helped us out with that. It is now about a $110 million project. So the project itself is about 6 miles long. We will be widening the highway through about 2 to 2.5 miles of that because of safety issues. We have a lot of turning movements that are causing a lot of crashes because it's a narrow 2-lane highway without any shoulders and places for people to hang out when they're trying to get on and off the highway. We are also going to install a roundabout at the County Road 225-160 intersection. Again, a safety improvement where we've had a number of fatal crashes due to turning movements, turning onto the highway, and people getting impatient with the volume of traffic and making bad decisions. And then there'll also be some passing lanes on the very east edge of the project, kind of out that green dot towards Bayfield. And then the whole project will have wildlife fencing as well as a couple of underpasses because Region 5's highest crash report is due to wildlife. So those are the high level parts of the project that this will be addressing. And then the other piece, the expedience of it with the grant, we do have to have the funds encumbered, have a contractor selected and on board by September of 2027, which may seem like a ways out, but our right-of-way processes take time, especially when we have property owners that aren't super happy, or I don't want to say happy, but we're in a disagreement on the value of their property, and Keith will get into that.
Okay, thank you, Julie. So just to note, one last item on this slide. So the owners are Gary and Judy Robinson. Next slide, please. As Julie indicated, the location of the project, this gives a little bit more of a zoomed in area. You can see Colorado 172 on the left-hand side of the screen, and 160 is the yellow horizontal line. And then the subject property is shown in yellow, and then the needed property is shown in orange. So zooming in a little bit more on the next slide, we get into some of the different parcels. So anytime that we acquire fee property, which is we refer to as right away as well, it's labeled as RW series, so RW31 and RW31A. And then a temporary easement is labeled as TE, which is TE31. The larger yellow highlighted area is not always considered on projects, but it's wildlife habitat, so it's 31-WH. And then we have a small TE at the bottom of that, TE or temporary easement, TE31A. So that really shows the needed property, and I'll get into why we need a wildlife habitat easement here in a little bit. Next slide. This just shows a relation to the parcels that I walk through when compared to the remainder or the entire property owned by the owners. Next slide. So this talks a little bit about the wildlife habitat. So this is for the New Mexico meadow jumping mouse. So anytime that we get into habitat or suitable habitat for this endangered species, we're required to mitigate for it. Working closely with the United States Fish and Wildlife, they have projected that the most suitable area to do mitigation would be adjacent to the bridge that we're disturbing. So next slide, you can see a little bit more information about why we're disturbing the wildlife habitat of the mouse or the New Mexico meadow jumping mouse. I always talk about the Preble's jumping mouse here in the Front Range. I don't get to talk a lot about the New Mexico meadow jumping range in the Western Slope. But all in all, we've been entering negotiations with the property owner for some time now. We are far in disagreement with the property owner. I'll walk through the slides here, or the table here in a little bit about the offers, the counter offers, and then the final offer on the property. So next slide really zooms in. So notice of intent to acquire was issued in July 16th, 2025. We had a valuation that was conducted, and that valuation was only on those parcels that I highlighted in the earlier slides, not the remainder. The valuation was almost $178,000. Our initial offer to the landowner was $178,000 on December 17th of 2025. The counteroffer from from the owner that did not include the wildlife habitat, which is the larger portion of those parcels, was just under $100,000. We did not accept that because we do need that wildlife habitat uh, for the mitigation for the United States Fish and Wildlife. We continued negotiations with the landowner, and they came back, well, if you need the wildlife habitat, we would like you just to purchase our entire property, which was valued, in their opinion, at $4 million. You can see that we did a per acre calculation in some of the above lines, just to give you a little bit of an idea of what that per acre cost would be. And you can see, I believe that the $4 million, if you take it divided by 61, I apologize, I don't have that per acre calculation, but it's far above what we need for the project. We're really do not believe that we need to require the remainder of the parcel. So the $4 million is really not something that we want to entertain for the entire property. We did do a written final offer to the property owner back on the 27th of February, 2026, for just the needed parcels that we need, which was $400,000. We've not got a response since then. So what we would like to do is tomorrow request that resolution to initiate the condemnation proceedings in hopes that we can come to terms with the property owner prior to filing anything with the courts. With that, Julie and I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you both. Any questions? Nobody online? Looks like we're good. Remind me, is there an appraisal then at some point if the negotiations do force you to go ahead?
And I'm sorry, can you repeat that, please?
Do they, I forgot the next steps. Do they have a right to get an appraisal, or how does that part handle?
They do we provide that right for an appraisal at the beginning when we issue the notice of intent to the property owners. They have not produced an appraisal from their perspective. Not going to elaborate and say why I believe that is true, but
Here, thank you both. On to the budget workshop right quickly. Jeff Sudmeyer and Bethany Nicholas, turning it over to you. Hi, Bethany.
All right, thank you. I'll go pretty quickly today. I'm here today just to present the final presentation on the FY27 annual budget. I have just a short agenda for you. If you want to go to the next slide, we can get started. So with review of this today, we will return tomorrow to, with your approval request, adoption of a resolution that will finalize the FY27 budget so that we can submit it to the legislature and the governor's office by the statutory deadline of April 15th. It's a short agenda because there's been very, very little that has changed since last month, but I did just want to take a minute and kind of go through the final revenue allocation plan and give you a chance, if you had any further comments or questions, to take one last look before we ask for that adoption. So I will go over sources and uses pretty quickly, and then talk through the narrative and appendices and the revenue allocation plan that are part of the full plan, and then go over sort of a timeline and next steps as far as what you can expect to come. Next slide. Okay, I won't walk through this in detail because it is literally these are the same numbers that you saw last month. So our revenue projections haven't changed. These are the sources that we have built into our FY27 budget. Federal programs still making up the largest portion at 35%, followed by
the Highway User Tax Fund, our second largest revenue source at 29%. And then if you do the math to add up all the enterprise funds on the left side of the slide, I think it's about 616 million, just about almost 27% of the total. So that's just a quick relook at our revenues, which I mentioned are the same that you saw last month. So next slide. On the other side of that, the uses have changed a little bit, and that's just due to one adjustment that was made. Staff updated the CTIO allocations just based on what the board has decided for their allocations. So there were some updates for CTIO. Otherwise, nothing else has changed with these allocations. So we're still seeing our largest spending priority as capital construction at 37%, followed by maintenance and operations at 20.7%, and then our pass-through programs, our sub-allocated programs at 20%. Those are the biggest chunks of where we've allocated our funding for FY27. Followed by kind of those smaller categories you see on the left-hand side of the slide there. Next slide. So our full final budget is posted online. If you Google CDOT budget, you'll find your way there. It includes the revenue allocation plan showing how we are prioritizing our revenues that we will receive next fiscal year or that we're forecasting to receive next fiscal year. The spending plan showing how we anticipate we will spend not only those revenues, but any cash balances and from prior years that we're still working on spending. And then there's a whole host of other on various topics you can see listed here. Take a closer look. And then next slide. Okay, so looking at the revenue allocation plan, you can see we're still reflecting 2.3 million total for CDOT and all of the enterprises in allocations. We've walked through this in kind of the various workshops we've had to date. So I'm not going to spend too much time kind of going through this again, but we did. Thank you, Herman, for passing out copies of the, and Keith for passing out hard copies for those of you here to take a look at kind of where all the numbers landed on that revenue allocation plan. Next slide. Okay, that brings me to timeline and next steps. So I mentioned earlier, we're happy to take any questions or comments or anything, if there's anything lingering kind of from our look last month. But we will return tomorrow to kind of request your approval of the resolution so that we can submit the budget. We do plan on being back in July, first thing to amend the budget once we start the fiscal year, because the legislature is in session and they are making all kinds of decisions that will impact us. So, we know for sure that we will be amending our administration line. So once the legislature adopts the long bill and we know what our appropriation is, we'll make sure that what we have in our budget matches that. And then any other legislation that we see, if there's an impact, we'll respond to that and bring an amendment in July. But that's it. Short and sweet today. No major changes, but just did want to talk about the budget and let you know we're ready to adopt. So with that, I can take any questions.
Any questions? Not seeing any at all, but just to underscore that we have seen this several times. And
Yeah.
so appreciate that. It's the Golden Gate budget, it comes back over and over. Okay, great. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So you all, I think you had a timing constraint. So if you are okay with it, we'll go ahead and get through this one and then take a break You can get up in the meantime, I think, just to get these guys, they had a constraint in their time. So go ahead. Oh, I should announce what it is. We're doing this in opposite order. We're not going to do the 10-year plan workshop yet. We're going to do the roadside fire mitigation update with Sean Smith, Bob Pfeiffer, and Jim Fox. So
yeah, thanks, Chair Cook. Before Bob and Jim start their detailed presentation for the commission, I want to stress that this is really a broad, multi-pronged initiative that we're going through. It involves many internal and external stakeholders. And as you review the slides, just please keep in mind the various CDOT and non-CDOT entities that are involved in the coordination of these efforts and tackling these issues from multiple angles. Beyond the physical labor, which the professional maintainers are out there doing, some other examples are going to be work within the meteorology realm. And then also, as was brought up earlier, about our environmental concerns and the mice. We have our purple mouse that we have to be considerate of here. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Bob.
Thank you. I'm Bob Pfeiffer. I'm the Deputy Director of Operations. And two of the groups that I'll be talking about today I have is emergency management, which is kind of driving this conversation today. And we call it winter operations or weather operations, but the meteorology team resides within my side of the organization. And today we thought it would be a good idea to kind of talk about what CDOT does around vegetation management. And specifically this year, we are focusing on fire mitigation on our right-of-way to kind of get ahead of it. So next slide, please. Oh, before we do, that's that picture. I always like to talk about the pictures. That picture was the fire that happened in Thornton just a few months ago. That was just a grass fire. That's what it does to the interstate, and that can create crash, really bad crashes. So luckily everyone got through there safely, but a very quick fire can do very disruptive things, not only obviously the environment and the buildings and so forth, but to our highway system. All right, next slide. So we'll see how well my meteorologist trained me to be one, and they do a fantastic job. This image here is really what I'm going to focus on. In this picture, a normal snowfall percentage for Colorado is yellow. Anything that is blue is below normal. So the only places we're seeing where our snowpack is getting to about normal is really Wolf Creek and I probably cannot pronounce that. Who can pronounce that name? There you go. Thank you. Gorge. I got that part. Are probably the only areas that we're going to hit about average. Everywhere else, we will definitely be below our snowpack. Next slide. So my meteorologist used a SNOTEL projection, and basically what this does is it kind of focuses on how much inches of snow we get and the trajectory to kind of our water sources, our kind of our snow, not necessarily snowpack, but how much water we could end up having. These are different percentiles of a projection. So the black line you see there is where we are right now. This is kind of this winter season. And the different colored dotted lines are if we are at a max projection or 90% of projection or 70% projection. As you see, the lower we go down, we fall under the more solid colors. The solid colors, the green is our median. That's what we normally are at. So if you get an idea, even if we got a lot of snow, maxed out the snow the next 60 days, at best, we may get kind of close to normal, just from our snow perspective. But this, unfortunately, the graph doesn't show that we're going to get there. This week, we were notified, typically our max or our peak snowpack in the mountains is usually at the end of April. We've already peaked out our mountains this week. That means we do not anticipate that the snowpack will increase anymore. It is now going to decrease, and then that's kind of melting faster than we expected. Okay, so next slide. So this is the drought projection that was done just a few weeks ago. Basically, the dark red and red areas obviously are exceptional droughts, extreme drought conditions, which is really the Central Mountains. Obviously, the colors, it doesn't look good for us. We are expecting a drought across the state. Next slide. This is interesting because, as we all are aware, it's not only not getting the snow and the rain that we need, we're also seeing a higher number of high wind or red flag warnings, which further takes the humidity out of the air. And we're seeing very low humidity. And if you've seen recently, you know, Excel's doing their proactive power shut off, which is usually anything below roughly 15% humidity or lower. This last week, we were as low as 8% humidity in the state, and the high winds do not help us in that situation. But as you see, over the last couple decades, this is the most red flag warnings we've had so far, and this is not, the season's not over yet. Next slide. So the brown area is the persistent drought. It will continue to persist, that the brown area will go into a drought. The yellow is developing into a drought. That's what this map is showing for our projections into May. Next slide. So our seasonal temperatures are going to start favoring above normal. That's kind of what it's showing here. If you see Colorado's in the, let's say the orange, a little bit darker orange, that is leaning above average for from about March until May. So meteorologists don't like to go out more than 3 days typically, so it really pushed their envelope to do 3 months. So they are making me give this presentation. So if they're wrong, then they still have a job. Next slide. This is the precipitation that's anticipated between March, April, and May. This is leaning that it will be below average. This is interesting because this is where you'll start seeing, you're going to hear me contradict myself a little bit, because we're also seeing a change from El Nino into neutral, which means there'll be more precipitation coming in during the spring. So we'll see if the meteorologists, who's right and who's wrong, but right now, NOAA is saying our precipitation will be below average this spring. So next slide. NOAA. Oh, I don't know. National Oceanic Atmosphere together. Man, I work for CDOT, and oceans are very rare in our part of the state. So, but I did learn, depending on the temperature of the ocean, depends if you're in an El Nino or El Nino. And right now you're seeing the El Nino because the temperature of the ocean is pushing the precipitation, and when it switches, it'll come towards us. So that was a kind of interesting fact. I did learn a little bit about oceanic temperatures. Next slide. So you got this slide. This is what we're showing in March, that this is a projection of wildland fire potential. And if you look into Colorado, it's really focused in the southeastern part of Colorado right now, which is a little bit interesting because we do not show that that is the most extreme area for the drought. But from a fire potential, this is showing an area that we need to be monitoring. And then the two smaller slides are just April, then May. And then if you go to the next slide, it is now June. And it now shifts that the fire potential moves into the western slope and the southwest area. So we'll be monitoring this area. Next slide. Now this is where we talk about El Nino and neutral. So El Nino, you'll see here that January, February, March, that's what JFM is, and February, March, and April, you'll start seeing the gray bars start coming up where you start moving into neutral. Neutral means that it will be more likely above average precipitation in spring. This is the contradiction in some of these maps. That's why the meteorologists are always saying they got to use different scientific sources to try to figure out what the crystal ball is telling them, because they really do believe that we will have a wet spring like last year. They're suspecting that it could be upwards towards 8 inches in May, which would be fantastic if we can get that much. The issue becomes as we quickly dry out. So even if we have a wet April and May, we will probably see it dry out fairly quick in June, just like we saw the western slope and southwest part of Colorado go into that fire area. Next slide. So highway vegetation mitigation, why we do it is, we do it for several different reasons. One is for line of sight. We do it to kind of promote the surrounding vegetation. We minimize snowdrift when we do that, because when you have that kind of resistance, it creates a snowdrift on the highway. But there are several reasons why we do it, but mostly is to also keep a clear zone. So if there's ever a crash, you're not running into a tree immediately off the pavement. And that's just an image of what an area we mitigated was before and after picture. Next slide. So some of the techniques we use, this is a mulching machine we've been looking at, but basically, we do everything here and we try to remove all the vegetation, and sometimes we bare ground it, which is a way we can chemically approach it, where basically it keeps it from growing as fast, the vegetation right along the side of the highway. But we also do it, the highways are natural fire lines or fire breaks. They have done many times. There was one right close to my house and Jessica's house, where actually 93 became that magic line that held the fire from coming and jumping over to the residential area. So highways are very, I mean, not only for evacuation, but you need first responders to get there, but they're also a barrier for fires to spread or prevent them from spreading. One thing we do not do, and I want to highlight that, is we do not do control burns on our right of way. Now, the fire districts and fire departments may do that, or the U.S. Forest Service, but they'll do it through permitting and work with us and collaborate, but they will be the ones that will handle that. And they have done that throughout our right of way. Next slide. So just to compare, kind of, you've probably seen these before, but that's a house on the left picture, and it's kind of like the defensible area of your house. You should clear brush away from your house so your house does not catch on fire. The image on the right is, and the checkered areas say that that's a road. We do that same kind of concept with mitigation closest to our road. So we were going to focus on zone 1, which is in orange, but we also have zone 2 and 3, which are how far from the pavement we do mitigation. Right now, we're going to focus on zone 1 in our conversation today, but just like a defensible home, we do that for the highway as well. All right, next slide. Now, this one's hot off the press, and I want to thank Darius's team for help with this image. I took it off of an interactable map that they gave us to overlay our highway system with the probability of burn, basically, map that we get from the fire, the Division of Fire Prevention and Control. So this is just an example of a map. This is an area that probably has the highest probability of burn, which is Highway 72, and that other one is Highway 119. So it's Jefferson and Boulder County. So this is kind of what we're going to do is take all the data sources that are and criteria and thresholds on the left and result into this type of interactive map that we're going to, I don't want to steal Jim's thunder, but Jim's going to talk about our kind of a game plan on how we're going to get mitigation focused in an area. When you have 9,000 miles or 24,000 lane miles of road, where do you start mitigation? What's the most surgical area can we do it to get the most bang for limited dollars we have? We're going to use this data to drive those decision making. And we're going to start with the most vulnerable areas that we feel that the probability of burn is the highest, and then work from there. And so this is kind of a map, and that we would share with our contractors and our maintenance staff to start mitigating where they can. Then once we get all that data prioritized, we're going to run it back by the Division of Fire Prevention and Control just to make sure that we're in line with what they're seeing. Even though we're using their data, I'm sure we will, but it's always good to have another set of eyes, again, using limited dollars that we have. Next slide. So after we prioritize it, we're going to based on any funding we get, we have some funding, but we probably will need more to handle some of this. We're going to kind of narrow down the scope to diseased trees or trees that are more than 50% dead that are within that zone 1 area we were talking about. One, that we shouldn't really have trees in that zone 1 for even a traffic safety perspective and a line of sight perspective. But we're going to try to just focus on the diseased trees and the trees that are 50% dead. We are looking at just chip and slashing and keeping the wood on site, having it just decompose on the side and hopefully rejuvenate the ground. But any large blocks or diseased trees will be removed and taken off of the site. The stumps, when we tackle this, they'll be about 4 inches off of grade. So basically, we want to make sure that they're as low as ground as possible without having to grind them all the way down. And then we're going to be looking at any ladder fuels. So that's basically any fuels about 5 feet high, making sure that any of the dead branches or anything are taken off the ground. So if a fire does come through, the trees do not become the jumping point to continue to spread the fire. And then this picture here is an example where you'll see a tree is at 50% and the one right of it is completely dead. That would be the trees we would probably be removing as an example, and that's on Highway 72. And then next slide, I think it's Jim's.
Thanks, Bob. Jim Fox, Deputy Director of Maintenance here in DMO. And been talking about this year, due to the weather conditions, the proposal is to enhance and expand what I'll call our vegetation management practices with a focus upon wildfire mitigation on selected areas. And Bob spoke to kind of that process that we're developing on how to pick the prioritization of those. I thought the next few slides, I thought I would speak to you a little bit about what I'll call our standard maintenance practices. So some of these efforts, mowing and tree removal, we do as part of our standard maintenance practices in our maintenance sections. And I thought I would just go ahead and maybe speak to that a little bit and talk about some of our typical accomplishments that we have with respect to how much we spend and then how much how many miles we mow or how many trees we remove. So I'll get into that in a little bit, but wanted to start with maintenance practices for mowing. And this is our standard practice, and we'll do this as part of this enhanced effort. These will be things that we'll be doing as well, just in a larger scale, with a focus on where those activities will take place with respect to prioritization. So Bob mentioned normally when we mow, typically in that zone 1, we mow for a lot of reasons. Wildfire mitigation is certainly one of them. Traffic safety, also drainage improvement, and also to help with the reduction of snow drifting. So we do it for a lot of reasons. In general, the maintenance sections, we mow those about twice a year. Typically try to time those in the spring and the fall based upon, spring when after the rains cease, and then we start to get some growth. We get them mowed before the summer, and then we'll do those again in the fall. There is some variation sometimes with respect to if we have some precipitation that's greater than we expected, but so there is some change with frequency, but in general, twice a year. And then of course we don't mow on red flag days, so we want to reduce that. We're out there doing these mitigation efforts, and we don't want to contribute to a potential issue. So, next slide, please. So I thought I would share with mowing operations what the maintenance sections have accomplished over the past, fiscal year 25 and fiscal year 26 year to date. So really what this will show is in both fiscal years 25 and 26 year to date, we're about 28,000 swath miles completed statewide. So a swath, typically our mowers are typically about 15 feet is the width of the deck. So think of a swath in that case would be a 15-foot swath, which fits nicely with our zone 1. So that's what we've accomplished. And then I wanted to kind of show for some context what we spent on that statewide. And you can see in 25, 5.1 million. And then this year to date is 3.9. Now we'll have some more. There is a difference in that cost. I mean, if you look at the actual miles done, they're close to the same, but the cost difference and the expense difference is quite different. There's some variables in there that I can't quite parse out. So we could have, some areas might have additional traffic control needs or different amount of staff out there. So there could be some variation in that. I can't fully explain, but did want to note that there has been a $1.3 million difference year to date, while mowing is pretty close to the same amount of swath miles. But next slide, please. That's okay. So I want to speak to kind of our tree removal and tree trimming operations that we do as part of our standard practices in the maintenance section. And again, the reasons that we do that now are are almost identical to what we're going to do those for in this proposed effort as well. And that's just to improve visibility, some fire mitigation as well. And then, times when those are around traffic signs. And there's other reasons as well why we remove trees or trim trees, but just want to highlight a few of those. Again, going back to those zones, zone 1 being the 0 to 15 off the edge of pavement, that's a concentrated area sometimes to remove trees or trim trees from those areas for the reasons that we explained before. Next slide, please. So for accomplishments, again, for fiscal year 25 and fiscal year 26 to date, you'll show across the state, what the maintenance sections have done. And we measure this in respect to an actual tree. So one of the challenges is that one tree can be a 2-inch diameter tree, or one tree can be a 24-inch diameter tree. So unfortunately, we don't have the granularity to kind of say what that is. So when you see 2,400 trees, it could be a variation of sizes. And you'll see in this year to date, there's 1,400 more trees that we've removed. And the expenditures are from fiscal 25 to 26 year to date are the same. I think it's the same conversation. Again, if a maintenance section goes into an area where there's a stand of 2-inch, 3-inch trees, very dense, they can go in there with, less time and less traffic control stuff and take care of those as opposed to a 1-foot diameter, 2-foot diameter here and there down the road. So I think that's why you might see a difference in why the same amount of money gets you more in 26 year to date as opposed to 25. But just wanted to give some context on how much we spend on the maintenance sections. So next slide, please. So now I'll move over to kind of, Bob's talked about kind of the approach for designing or how to determine where we're going to go in the prioritization. Wanted to speak a little bit about what to do, how we're going to deliver this work. And we see it as a dual method approach. So we're going to continue to use our internal maintenance sections, and then we're looking to use contracted services as well. And I'll explain those a little bit further on the next slide, please. So for our internal maintenance forces, the idea right now, or the proposal right now, is to have them continue to do the mowing. We're set up for it. They do it anyway every year. So really the level of effort, now there could be a prioritization conversation, and based upon the spring, we'd be doing it more just based upon how much moisture we get and how much growth we get. But the proposal was to have our internal maintenance sections start out by doing the mowing and associated weed trimming in that zone 1. So now as far as the tree removal and the tree removal and some tree trimming, that's an approach we're looking to take, is to do contracted services to take care of that. So right now, as the other part, kind of this is being developed concurrently, we've been working on how our method of project delivery would take place. So we're having conversations internally and trying to leverage existing contract mechanisms. And right now, a lot of the work is just being done on developing a scope of work that could be used. So there's some nuances and techniques or technical information that we want to try to pull into a scope of work so that we're used to taking care of trees, and we have, removing trees, but just this nature of this work and some of the sizes, we want to make sure that we're putting together a scope of work so that we do go to a contractor. If we do go to a contractor, we have a good document with technical requirements. So we're working on that concurrently or right now as well, to remove the items that Bob mentioned, the dead trees or the 50% trees. So that's the plan. Well, that's what we're working on right now. Again, just trying to leverage contracting mechanisms, trying to leverage other contracts across the state, other agencies that do a similar work. Ours is a little bit different in context because we're not going into a mass 10-acre parcel of land. We're focused on the right of way, which brings about, it's obviously much, it's linear. We got traffic control, but at least try to leverage some of the technical elements of an existing contract, say with the Colorado State Forest Service. So working on that right now so that when we're ready to go, we can get a scope of work out to whatever contract mechanism that we use. Next slide, please. Yep. So thank you. Bob and I are happy to answer any questions or provide any additional detail as needed.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Masters.
Yeah, the public comments that I've been reading, there seems to be a common theme in the last several, that CDOT has a permitting process for these people to remove something along roadways. I don't quite understand why we would be having a permit process. Can you shed a little light on that at all?
Well, if you do anything on a right of way, you need a permit. Doesn't matter what you do, you have to go pull a permit. Either an access or maintenance permit is required to work on our highways. Also, we need to make sure that people working on our right of way have insurance and bonding and traffic control and access to do what they're doing correctly. I'm sorry, did you want? Yeah.
Yeah, great question. So also just to add to what Bob comments is that earlier I talked about the environmental concern. We just don't want to dump somebody in our right of way, and next thing you know, we have an environmental issue with a mouse or the speckled trout or cutthroat frog, you name it, or if there's migratory birds in the tree and they cut it down. So we have to be very responsible environmentally, and this comes up as well.
as well as just even if you just cut, you can actually create issues for water flow and how water moves around our right of way. So there's other technical issues as well around water impacts as well.
But wouldn't a local fire department that say up in the Evergreen area, wouldn't they have those same restrictions? I mean, they would know what to do, correct? You would think if they were trying to cut a line, you would think they would know. No?
Yeah, no, they don't know the rules and the federal rules that we have to follow under their USDOT or their migrating bird. I'm not, the fire departments I've been working with, their approach is a little bit different because their mission's a little bit different than our mission. You know, we have to balance, just like we just talked about just a few minutes ago about protecting wildlife habitats, that I think they're looking at protecting, you know, life safety and property. So the priorities are sometimes a little bit different.
You good, Mr. Minister? No, are you good? Okay. Well, I'll piggyback on that. Should we create, I think I saw this crop up, a special category for permits to be pulled? And if the county comes in, do they pull a permit also, or is that just for private entities?
It depends on what the scope is. If a county came in or the fire district came in and said, hey, we'd like to mitigate this area and it's 40 feet off the right of way, sometimes they'll come in and talk to our superintendents and then collaborate and try to figure that out. But as soon as they get close to the road, there are definitely more rules that are applied. I mean, our own employees have to do it. We wouldn't want somebody else to get on the highway and just start chopping away right next to the cars. So I think that Chief Stefanik wants to.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in here because I heard the comments at commission last week or last month regarding you know, the traffic control costs and stuff like that. I don't want to get into any situations, but we've had some pretty horrific situations where we've had workers on the side of the road outside of traffic that got hit by cars that weren't paying attention or lost control. We have a big issue in the state of Colorado with work zone fatalities. So it's a major issue when you're working in our right of way. If we're far off the roadway, I think we can work with individuals. We also have the consideration Sean has said, but I also, we are getting real close to revising a procedural directive we have within CDOT where our crews are out on our roads. If whatever they're doing, surveying, geotech, anything, they need to have the proper traffic control and mitigation to make sure that they're protected while they're out there. We don't know what drivers are going to do. And when we have, whether it's HOAs or organizations working within our right of way, ultimately they are within that cone that could be hit by a distracted driver, someone lost control. So there is a lot of, I don't want to call it liability concerns from us, but responsibility concerns of having people in our right of way. When they're doing this mitigation, there's probably trucks pulled off the side of the road, chipper trucks, items like that. So it can be concerning, and we just want to make sure they're protected. So unfortunately, I can see when it comes to the permit costs and traffic control costs required for that. But at the end of the day, we're talking about safety. So it's a tough scale to balance.
Yeah, and having a TCS helps to address that, correct? Okay, that's good to know. Other questions? Go ahead, Commissioner Hart.
No question, just a comment. Thank you very much for this presentation. I think it's extremely helpful. And we knew that, you know, we were involved to an extent with these kind of activities, but we didn't know the extent to which we were doing it. And then secondly, the additional slides that were added with regard to the current climate conditions. I have to tell you, every time I've seen those kind of presentations, I just absolutely love it because it helps us graphically understand where we are, where we have been, where we appear to be headed to, and it affects every single thing we do, specifically including what we do here. And, you know, knock on wood, it didn't look particularly good for our state for the danger that we're heading into, potential danger that we're heading into this year. And what amazes me is how much of that danger, it isn't just in the mountains like you would normally expect, but it's out on the high plains as well. And we've actually seen some of that activity already. I just want to applaud everybody that put this together. I think it's extremely helpful. It's the kind of information that I hope we can continue doing, connecting some of this weather dynamic information that we need in order to better understand the types of things that CDOT's faced with and what we're faced with and where we're headed in this state. So thank you for that.
Well stated. Commissioner Bowman?
Thank you. This is kind of off the cuff, but as we're looking at messaging, the Colorado Tourism Office, one of my other contracts is working with stewardship. And we do have 7 principles. They're actually called Do Colorado Right. And one of them is be careful with fire. And we automatically have messaging that CDOT used to be a partner, and we would love to have you use it. So if you need that, please reach out to me and we can make that available to you. So for digital signs or wherever, you want that to be.
Thanks for that. Just to clarify, we're doing our usual mowing, but we are prioritizing according to the maps. So maybe a different area we'll be covering, or are we ourselves covering our usual area, but the contractors are going to be focused more on the fire hazard areas?
Thank you for the question. I think on the mowing, our intent is to cover that with internal forces. And there would be a prioritization conversation, but the maintenance sections do a great job of covering the areas that they need to cover twice a year typically anyway. But I think there could be a prioritization conversation for mowing. What we're exploring for the contracted services would be the removal and trimming of trees, just to get somebody who's a contractor who's in that world and then can really make good ground on getting that and has the equipment. I suspect some of these trees would require a variation of equipment. There could be some larger trees that may need to be addressed. And I think by going the contracted services route, we can be more effective and more efficient. But of course, our maintenance sections are always there to help out wherever they can in whatever way. But mowing would be the concentration for internal and then contracted would.
And for prioritization, yes, the map is going to be used for prioritization of the tree removal because that's going to be very surgical. We can't just tell them go drive this road and just cut down trees when you see them. So we want to make sure we're putting them in the right spots to maximize our dollars.
Yeah, just to close out, the question is, one, we have professional highway maintainers. We don't have professional arborists. So that's why we're looking for contracted services. And with that, with the lack of snowfall that's been identified, and the snow and ice contingency still sits at $12 million, our intent is to go ahead and utilize that snow and ice contingency to go out for contracted services and utilize that funding.
That's great. And thank you all. Really appreciate that you're getting out ahead of this. That's a big deal, and I know it's appreciated. We mentioned it at Dr. Cog. So we have Transportation Director for Region 2, Shane Ferguson, who's going to give us an update about a fire in Colorado. Please.
Yeah, good afternoon. The timing of this presentation is a little shocking, actually. So yes, we have fire on 115. It's currently partially closed. It's north of Penrose in the Fort Carson area. The information we have at this time, just as the article indicated, that they believe it started off the highway. Fortunately, so far, the winds have not been an issue, so they're still working to contain it. I believe the Fort Carson Fire Department is pretty much in charge in that area currently. And again, CDOT's resources are there to assist in the closure and allowing for emergency vehicles to access the area as necessary. So that's the information I have at this time. We'll continue to be out there and assisting the fire department as needed.
Thank you very much. It's really scary, but thank you for your work in helping everybody involved. Okay, let's take a break. About 10 minutes, be back at 3:15, and then we'll plunge into the 10-year plan. Okay, we're gonna continue on with our agenda. Thank you all. Next, we have the 10-year plan workshop. We've got Darius Pakbaz and Marissa Gahan. I'll never get it. Sorry about that. Gahan. Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
Yep.
Appreciate everybody's time today. What we're going to do at this workshop is kind of our final workshop, which is talk about the public comment process and talk about all of the public outreach that we had done for the past year and a half for development of not only the 10-year plan, but the entire planning cycle. And then talk about achieving the goals that are set out with the 2050 plan as well. So if we go on to the next slide, I think the agenda kind of outlined that, what I just said. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Marissa Gahan, multimodal planning manager within my division, who's going to talk about the public comment period and our public and stakeholder engagement process. Marissa.
Thank you, Darius. If you want to go to the next slide. Awesome. So I wanted to first start by recapping all the great outreach that has gone into our long-range plan update and then associated 10-year plan. And again, like Darius just said, that this started really back, you can go all the way back to May of 2024, where we started conversations with our MPOs and TPRs. And then last summer, the summer of 2025, we did a lot of really thoughtful engagement, worked with a lot of you in this room on doing telephone town halls for each of the commission districts. So we were able to talk to communities in each area of the state with those telephone town halls. We reached over 50,000 people with those phone calls. Related to that, at the same time, for the people who didn't want to chat with us necessarily on the phone, we also had a statewide public survey, which got over 3,400 comments and responses from that. That outreach, which was again conducted last summer, we did and was bilingual outreach for both the telephone town halls and the statewide plan survey. In tandem with all of the efforts we had been doing, we did keep our website. We really pushed a lot of information, a lot of great information out on our website. We had, many of you might recall, we had a lot of interactive maps and information and data that we really strived to make publicly available as we worked not only with the public, but with our stakeholder groups. So again, going back to May of 2024, when we kicked off our long-range plan update, we've been meeting quarterly with each of the rural transportation planning regions at their quarterly meetings. Some even more often if they met more often, and then monthly meetings with our metropolitan regions in the same time period as well. In addition to that, we also gathered input from key stakeholder groups, such as our freight carriers, environmental organizations, bike and ped advocacy groups, and transit agencies. So most recently, we did have a final 2-week public comment period to share sort of the culmination of all this outreach, what we had put together based on what we heard from them in the earlier outreach, which I will go over on actually the next slides. If you want to go to the next slide.
So before we go into that, I do want to emphasize that this has been close to a 2-year-long process. So it isn't just about from the two-week public comment period is gathering that stakeholder feedback that we have been working on for the past 2 years. I personally have visited all of the rural TPRs in order to help work on developing the needs that that the transportation needs throughout the state in order to help develop this 10-year plan. I know my staff has done the same. I know the partners throughout the regions go to every single TPR meeting, and same with their staffs in order to help develop these plans. We had our 3P meetings with each county in order to help what are the county priorities. So there is a lot of engagement that went into developing this plan. That's just beyond all of this. Plus, I know there's probably about half of the commission wasn't here, but those telephone town halls that were held earlier this year where we're able to provide feedback, and a lot of that was incorporated. I see Jason is gone, but one of the stories here is we heard about Douglas Pass and some of the issues that was on Douglas Pass. And now that's a key route in order for folks to get services between Rangeley and Craig and Grand Junction and Douglas Pass is a project that is on the 10-year plan. So I just want to emphasize that this process started and can help continue with feeding into our not only our 10-year plan, but all of our efforts for transportation improvements when we take a look at the full long-range plan, looking at it for 25 years. And we have the opportunity to continue to iterate going forward into the future as well. So thanks, Marissa.
Appreciate you reiterating. You want to go to the, so one thing to do, the most recent 2-week public comment period, we launched a web map recognizing that we wanted a very public friendly interface for people to be able to see the 10-year plan projects and then navigate to the area of the state that they're in. And then using this map, they were able to click on different projects and look at the fact sheets associated with each project. And then we had a form that they could fill out if they wanted to leave a comment about a specific project, or if they had a general comment, they could leave that as well. So that's sort of how we structured this the final 2-week public comment period. You want to go to the next slide. So we did receive about 140 total online comments during this 2-week period. And we did see about or over 400 web map views. So that was really exciting to see that even in that short period of time, we did have a lot of traffic looking at the map. Most of the comments, 57% of the comments we received were submitted from Denver, with 86% of the comments from the greater Denver area. So it was very skewed towards the Denver metro area. But I think that's like what we tried to lead with earlier. We look at this as sort of one point of public comment, and we build on, that's why we did the telephone town halls and the broader surveys, because we want to collect that look at this all together. But for this public comment, this is where we got the responses. You want to go to the next slide. So this is another way of breaking it down by city or town. Again, the vast majority of comments were from people in Denver and the surrounding areas. Comments came from residents, advocacy groups, elected officials. A lot of people had corridor-specific comments that they left. There were several call to action emails that came out of advocacy groups that were advocating for increased multimodal project funding. So based on those call to action emails, a lot of that generated some form-filled comments based on that. You want to go to the next slide? So there's a lot on this slide, but all the public comments that we received are accessible on the website, so you can view them all, but we tried to summarize them as best we could for you. So first, we heard that safety is a universal priority. 73% of the comments cited safety concerns, ranging from freeway crashes to pedestrian safety to even emergency response time. So, I think that was a very much a through line throughout all the comments. Next, we heard that there was a high demand for multimodal investment, again, especially in the Denver metro area. 83% of the public comments emphasized the need for transit, bike ped, and multimodal infrastructure, things like bus rapid transit and passenger rail. Next, there was a strong focus on maintenance. 53% of the public feedback urged CDOT to continue our focus on the state of good repair, investments, and preserving our existing infrastructure. And then lastly, we did receive corridor specific needs. People like to comment on the corridors that they use every day. So we had a lot of comments on corridors like I-25, I-270, I-70, US 36. And there was diverse opinions on that. Some people wanted to see more multimodal investments. Some people wanted more expansion. So a variety of opinions on our corridors. If you want to go to the next slide. So we also analyze our comments, and we did this for the telephone town halls and the statewide survey we conducted last summer. We analyze our comments in line with our performance goal areas. This reflection is essential to ensuring that what we hear from the public aligns with our goals and builds public trust and help us to deliver meaningful results for the people of Colorado. So the 10-year plan's role in all of this is that we must demonstrate with the 10-year plan how projects align with the public input and produce measurable outcomes toward meeting our performance goals. So, these goals, I'm sure you're very familiar at this point, but the goals to fix our roads, advance transportation safety, sustainably increase transportation choice. We align the public comment, make sure that we're heading in the right direction. What Darius is going to do next, and the next part of this presentation, is describe in more detail how the 10-year plan helps CDOT to achieve these performance goal areas.
You have one more slide.
More slide, I'm sorry. They're switched around in my version. So I don't think I have much else to say. These are the key takeaways that I think I've already summarized, that safety is a strong shared value, that there was a lot of comments about it's some differing views on how to allocate our limited resources along corridors. Some advocated for no action on our corridors and instead looking at more multimodal needs, while others wanted us to focus even more on freight mobility, maintaining and repairing existing infrastructure. So there is a balance there that I think we try to achieve with the 10-year plan. And then again, just recognizing that the Denver area engagement really drove the participation for this final public comment period.
Thank you. I'm just wondering if we have the right version.
Some of the slides kept me on my toes a little bit.
Okay.
I don't know.
Yeah. So just kind of to help identify, I think we're going to get into talking about how not only the 10-year plan helps achieve these the goals that we described in what we colloquially call PD14, but we also have to keep in mind that these are statewide plan goals, how all of our programs help achieve these. And we have been talking about these piecemeal, but we wanted to kind of help bring that together. And when we take a look at some of these investments, think of the 10-year plan. It's not all of our projects, but it does help directly advance some of the priorities in the overall plan. And how can the 10-year plan help advance safety outcomes, asset condition, and multimodal benefits? Well, anyway, I can continue talking without the presentation. Moving into, if we're reminded of those particular goals, we start off with fixing our roads, and those performance measures include improving our drivability life, getting to 80% drivability life on the entire system, and reduce the amount of poor drivability life. Slide 13. Slide 13 is not correct. All right, Herman's figured it out. All right. I'm going to continue talking while Herman gets that figured out. 80% drivability life by the end of the performance period, and reducing the interstate pavement in poor condition to below 1%, and maintaining the percent of our bridges in poor condition to 5% or below by the end of the performance period. If we take a look at safety, we want to reduce the number of traffic-related fatalities and serious injuries by 50% by 2037. And then moving on to sustainably increase transportation choice, we have goals to increase the amount of revenue service miles from all transit services by 83% by that performance period, achieve a 1% annual reduction in VMT per capita, and reduce the GHG from the transportation sector in line with baseline. All right. I'll take the blame for this one. We were doing so well with the technology, and I messed it up. I apologize. All right, here we go. We'll do it the PDF. Okay, so advancing transportation safety. This was the goal for this was the measures to help evaluate the goal. I've already mentioned those. If we can go on to the next slide. Fix our roads. We have the four main goals. One is taking a look at the state highway system as a whole, the drivability life measure, as I mentioned previously, and then the interstate performance measure, and then our bridge targets, which we are meeting currently, I should mention right now. And then looking at sustainably increasing transportation choice. Next slide, please. I had already mentioned those, the revenue service miles, the reduction in VMT per capita, and the GHG reduction. So, and we can skip over this. We went over this slide previously. So how does the 10-year plan help achieve these targets? So as I mentioned, we're going to talk a little bit about the 10-year plan, but we're also going to mix in, try to help out what does this look like in the future as well, to kind of wrap up this conversation. So let's go to the next slide. In terms of fixing our roads, some of these slides are stuff that we presented at the last one, but I think it's good to kind of repeat them a bit, is the asset management budgets. As you know, for 2030 and 40, for planning purposes, we had increased surface treatment funds by 6.2 and 2.3% increases respectively compared to previous years, to improve pavement condition. And this is taking a look at how we can keep pavement in the condition that it's in. Now, in terms of bridge condition, there is an increase that gets about $40 million a year. However, we're going to talk about what the bridge and tunnel enterprise is going to do to help continue to improve bridge condition in future years, on some future slides on there. But they're going to continue to invest $40 million in preventative maintenance from the CDOT bridge program. Next slide, please. So this is a slide that we presented, I want to say last month, but it wasn't. It was back in January, that more than half of the projects are going to include pavement or bridge asset management elements, with its distributed throughout all of our regions. that are going to help reduce the backlog and of poor assets throughout the state. And you can see some numbers in here. If we go to the next slide. We're estimating that it's increasing the surface treatment budget by about 65% during that 10-year period, or adding the equivalent of about 7 additional years to the surface treatment program than what we additionally had with the investments that we're adding into the 10-year plan to help not only keep the roads that are in good condition and fair condition that we have now, but also addressing that poor backlog. And that's not including some of the other one-time treatments that have been done. Most recently, the example is the redistribution funds, the $80 million that the commission approved in November for those overlay projects that are going to happen. We can go to the next slide. Following up on Bridge, they are contributing about $637 million in the next 10-year plan, with various amounts in future years. With they're treating about 300,000 square feet of poor deck area in order to help us keep under that, with about 30% of the 10-year plan including bridge work, to help us continue to meet those targets and performance measures. Next slide, please. And so this should be a slide that's familiar, but it includes the whole state instead of just part of the state, divided at that line right at the close to the continental divide. I don't think our regions are quite at the continental divide, but taking a look at, we got 59 of the rural road paving projects going forward, and then you 78 that includes some sort of paving as part of the next iteration of the 10-year plan. Next slide. And then 72 projects are going to include some sort of bridge work in it, with the dark blue dots are where it's the primary focus of the project, and then light blue is an element, but not necessarily the primary focus of it. If we go to the next slide, I believe we're going to focus on safety and talk a little bit about that and how it helps achieve the our safety goals. The 10-year plan, excuse me. So I'm not going to focus a lot on these first slides, but that kind of give you a little bit of background. Our excellent state highway safety plan kind of focuses in on our safety strategy, which is looking at the safe system approach, which is focusing in on these 5 areas: safety culture, safe roads, safe people, safe driving, and post-crash care. And it has specific strategies in order to help achieve that. If you have some time, I highly encourage you to look through that and see all the work that went into it. I should also note that our safety planners, as part of that, all of that outreach, also went out and talked specifically about how we can help improve safety as part of developing that plan, which is one of the things that help feed into the 2050 overall plan as well. So when we take a look at safety projects, if we want to go to the next slide, please. Taking a look at these countermeasures, these proven countermeasures on what can be when our regions go out and develop projects, what are the countermeasures that can be put in from an engineering standpoint or from a behavioral standpoint that can help improve crashes, because it's very hard to predict. You know, it's very hard to say do X and then fatalities go down. You want to improve crashes, and I'll look to our chief engineer. If I get anything wrong, you'll correct me. So we want to improve crashes, because if there isn't a crash, then you're not going to have a fatality or a serious injury. So in terms of bicycle and pedestrian, here's a list of the items that are the FHWA proven countermeasures list on items that we can do to help improve vulnerable road user crashes with vehicles. If we want to go to the next slide. In order to reduce roadway departure crashes, these are the proven safety countermeasures that can be done to help reduce those issues. And then finally, to help take a look at reducing crashes at intersections, what we can do, which one of the proven countermeasures, as we had talked about earlier, is, of course, roundabouts. And now, going back to the 10-year plan, next slide, please. When we take a look at the safety projects in the 10-year plan, when we're taking a look at projects with shoulders improvements and passing lanes, we have projects all over the state, but when we take a look at what we can take a look at, excuse me, I'm repeating myself. What can be done to reduce the amount of crashes? When we put in these improvements, we can reduce, predicting to reduce crashes by 20 to 40% in those areas with those projects. We go to the next slide, which I believe is wildlife crashes. 20 to 40% reductions on areas with wildlife vehicle interactions. Next slide, please, which I believe is intersections, which we have 86 projects throughout the state. Again, 20-40% reductions on predicted reduction on crashes at intersections. So if we reduce the amount of crashes that we have, then we can help reduce the amount of serious injuries and fatalities. And that's why we're having these, that's why these projects were chosen, in addition to the input that we got from the communities and our TPRs and our planning partners, that this is the most important projects with the limited resources that we have. And then taking a look at sustainably increasing transportation choice, a couple of slides that we've repeated a little bit. So we noted that we have $60 million set aside over the next 10 years to help support Bustang fleet and other Bustang capital investments. And then we have additional 15 projects to help support mobility hubs and support stops. Plus we have 50 projects for local transit, transit service throughout the state. Next slide, please. Another 74 projects will include active transportation elements throughout communities in the state. And then I think we have one more slide after this on active transportation. We don't, I apologize. So the outcome of that is the 10-year plan has projects that are supporting our sustainably increased transportation goals. And when we take the 10-year plan and take a look at some of the other programs that we have throughout the department, what we are able to see, if we go to the next slide, please, is that starting with the VMT, we've seen that VMT has gone down, and based on current trends, it will continue to go down. So this is a graphic that we used at our SMART Act hearing a couple of months ago, that VMT per capita has gone down 10% since 2005, while population has increased 28%. Based on current trends, it's probably going to go down another 7% over the next 10 years using our own models that we had for the GHG transportation plan. And that's and when you take a look at it from 2005 levels, that's a 19% reduction. And using information from the demographer's office, population is expected to increase another 11% over the next 10 years in the state, which is a 42% increase since 2005. Next slide, please. In terms of GHG emissions, the trends right now based off of the programs that the department has in place and the efforts that have been done through the administration's near-term roadmap and near-term actions is taking a look at projecting a 33% reduction in emissions by the end of the plan. So taking a look at, if we're looking at the graph, that's the inventory over the past 30 or so years since 2005. The purple line is business as usual, which is showing a reduction if nothing were to happen. And then you're seeing the roadmap baseline, which is when the administration reset that when they did the second roadmap. And you have your near-term action, which is the additional actions that happened after the roadmap. So that's taking a look at some of the progress that is being made with some of those actions that are being taken, which includes the GHG planning standards. Sorry, I got caught up a little bit with that. And then finally, next slide, please. increasing the vehicle service miles goals. Of course, we have major rail projects that are going to be listed in our 10-year plan. And we have talked about Front Range Passenger Rail, Joint Service Rail projects, the Mountain Rail project. We have major bus rapid transit projects that are listed in our plan, Federal Boulevard and the Colorado Boulevard projects. But we also have our Clean Transit Enterprise Formula funding grants that are just starting to go out and is providing an estimated $350 million. And these local transit agencies based on this additional funding, they estimate and project that they can provide an additional 29.9 million revenue service miles throughout the state by 2030, with potentially increasing the number of unlinked passenger trips by 46 million. Next slide, please. So the future isn't certain. These are all predictions. So I can't guarantee anything, but a lot of what's in the plan and what we have as far as our entire program of projects from not only the 10-year plan, but from our asset management program, our maintenance programs, our Office of Innovative Mobility programs, our grant programs are working together to help achieve these goals. So are all of these meeting the targets? No, but we are trending in the right direction on a lot of these goals. We still have more work to do, but we can continue to iterate and look at these goals. I will note that we do provide an annual scorecard every single year around the end of summer, so we can continue to iterate and continue to look at it. And we don't just set the 10-year plan down every 10 years and we can continue and move forward. We have the opportunity to reset every 4 years. We have the opportunity to redo our 2050 plan every 4 years as conditions change. So I won't spend too much time on this slide because I think I've repeated the slide 3 times. This allows us, the plan can be amended. I think I've already mentioned that. We'll talk about the next 4-year cycle, probably around the fiscal year 29 standpoint. But of course, there's always bid savings. We need to move money around. Things are never certain. There is a process for that. We have it outlined in Policy Directive 703, so those will be taken on as a case-by-case basis once the plan is adopted, should that be done in a future month. We will continue to update not only the commission, but the general public on a regular basis with a 10-year plan dashboard that's updated as soon as any action is taken. It's available publicly right now on our website, a quarterly report, a version that we put into the budget submission. We include information on not only the 10-year plan, but other construction projects in the annual accomplishments report. And then many of our projects have their own web pages on codedot.gov as well. And so right now, if we go to the final slide, the plan is that staff is planning to bring the project framework for adoption to the commission at next month's meeting, commission meeting, and then start working on the STIP and the budget development, which will actually set out the money. I should note that these are just planning dollars. It's setting out a plan. The actual allocation of dollars is done through the STIP and the annual budgets for these. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions commissioners may have, and thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Darius. Any questions or comments? Commissioner Jones?
Thank you so much for this presentation. I have a couple of different ones. One is the summary of comments that you provided, and I appreciate that this has been a 2-year process, but I'm just curious how you would characterize the public comments that have come in on the draft plan. How will they impact or influence staff or commissions? What impact will they have? How are they supposed to be used? Help me understand that. Or will they be staff proposed changes?
I think that as far as the comments, the ultimate decision on adopting the plan is up to the commission. So it'll be up to the commission on how they want to take the comments on there. I will note that we provided the information on there that that we got where the comments came from and how the comments were provided, knowing that we had a 2-year-long process. There was a lot of comments that came in form filled. We had a lot of comments from one particular area, and that we are trying to build a statewide plan with limited amount of dollars, working through trying to balance a lot of different interests throughout the state on here. We do appreciate a lot of people's comments on people providing comments on these items on here, but we encourage, what's the best way to put this? There's a lot of time to put in, there's always time to provide additional comments when we develop projects, because it's not the end. We have project concepts and designs on what we're going to do, but we oftentimes have additional public outreach when we're getting ready to develop those projects. When we are starting construction, or when we have public outreach meetings right when we're starting the construction of the project. So it's not the end of the public comment space as well.
Yeah, I'd add to that. We disproportionately saw comments come in from Metro Denver. So I think that probably skewed a little bit the results that we saw. But if you want to see in my opinion, a better representation of statewide opinion, go to the 2050 plan, where they reflected much of what they've heard through that extensive outreach throughout the state. So thanks though. Any other?
Yeah, no, thanks for that. I just wanted to make sure where I knew how I was supposed to be interpreting and using that in this process. I really appreciate you going back and doing the evaluation of how the 10-year plan matched up with PD 14 goals. I think that's a great process, and I found the presentation fascinating. I guess one thing I struggle with a little bit is we talked about, you talked about them in terms of number of projects, and it kind of reminds me of the fire mitigation presentation. When you count numbers of trees, some of them are 2 inches in diameter, and some of them are 12 inches in diameter, and they're not, in terms of figuring out what that means. It's hard to treat all trees equally. So I guess, is there, what would be also helpful is to know what percentage of the funding went towards each goal. And it's very clear that this is an art, not a science, because you have different projects having different attributes. But I guess it would be helpful to get a sense of that magnitude of where we're investing the dollars and how that came out. And I don't know if that's information that you have, but, or maybe it's a comment for the next time we do this, but so that we have a sense of the magnitude of how that funding's being allocated. And I will admit that I'm asking that in the context of a narrative that's out there suggesting we're investing way too much in transit and multimodal, and that we should be spending more money on roads. There's a ballot initiative to that effect that would change the Constitution. Like, yeah. It's a big conversation out there. And I look at the draft budget that we just were presented on, and for CDOT, the $2.3 billion budget, it looks like 5% of that's going into multimodal. And 95% of that's going into the rest of the transportation system. And you say, well, that's not very much. So I'm just curious, how do we match up the narrative with that budget and then what you just presented with the 10-year plan? What's the response in terms of how much are we investing? Is it too much? Is it not enough? I don't know, because it's hard to know what that number actually is.
Yeah, that question is a much harder question to answer, because it all depends on what exactly is happening when you take a look at the final design of the project. Because when we're looking at like proposed designs of projects right now, and when we actually go to construction, that can change, because we can take a look at specific pieces on here. My colleagues in the regions know this much walk on here, but we may come out and say, oh, you know, the culvert's bad, we got to repair this on here. And so it's much harder to come out with that because you don't know all of those pieces out there initially on there. You have an estimate of the cost and those become more clearer down the line. And it's hard to maintain, but it is a note for the future on there. So it's something I can't answer at the moment.
Other, Commissioner Ritter.
Yeah, following up on that, I mean, there's a lot of stuff in the political water about how much is being spent on roads and highways and concrete and asphalt in the state. Now, if I can pounce on Commissioner Jones's comment about 5 to 6%, can I then go back to some of these folks who were throwing some of this data out there about how little we're spending on roads and highways and saying, actually, you know, it's close to 90 to 95% we're spending on the roads and highways, including administrative costs and things such as that. Is that an accurate statement, or am I open to charges of, well, lying? Yes, possibly. I was just saying exorbitant activity.
If we're talking in terms of the budget, that might be a better question for Jeff or Bethany. I don't see Bethany, but if Jeff is still on.
He may have decided that his health is better off not talking to us. I'll hold that.
All right. Thank you, Commissioner.
You know, because it's a bigger issue that we all are going to have to come to grips with.
Thank you. Commissioner Marcano.
All right, thank you, Chair Cook, and thank you for the overview here. I have a question around safety. So it's one of our priorities. And, you know, I've been doing a dangerous thing, which is say reading. You know, it's kind of come to my attention that driver behavior changes the more comfortable, right, or the less comfortable they are. So a lot of what we're considering safety enhancements, such as highway widening, such as longer and clearer sight lines, gentler curves, invite motorists to speed or to they feel a little more, because they feel a little more comfortable, right? You'll have the same dynamic in your local road, you know, on arterials where there's, you know, basically 6-lane highways running through our cities, and folks feel comfortable doing 60 miles an hour or 50 miles an hour as opposed to, you know, the posted limit of like 45. So we get a similar dynamic on highway infrastructure as well. And if I'm not mistaken, we unfortunately went up last year, right, for road fatalities. Yeah, I saw a nod. So I'm curious, how are we squaring that circle? If safety is the goal, but we are designing things in a way that make people feel safer, despite the fact that they're not in reality safer because they're engaging in more dangerous behavior, right? Because really the big issue here, it's a physics question, right? It's your mass times velocity, right? Or yeah, is that right? Is the force which you would hit something or someone else that actually leads to like those fatalities or serious injuries. So how are we squaring that circle?
I apologize. I was listening, but I think you were tying it to some of the, if you want to call it widening or capacity projects with speeds. Objectively, I don't think that the 10-year plan has a tremendous amount of capacity in widening projects in it. I also think if you give a driver an 8-foot lane and a one-way roadway, they will speed if they can. We have implemented automated speed enforcement in segment 5 of the construction zone, which is a very narrow zone. It slows traffic down. I'll show some stats tomorrow on that. We had an unfortunate accident about a week and a half ago where we had an aggressive driver that was mad because he couldn't go any faster because people in front of him were doing the speed limit, got to the 3-lane section and just tried to beat person to the next lane, fatality. I wish I could predict drivers. I wish I could get everyone to slow down. I I think we take a look at all of the proven safety countermeasures that are up on that were up on the slides, and we try to push those where we can, and incorporate those where we can. At the end of the day, it comes down to bad judgment. We can engineer, we can build, we can do anything we can, but I can't control what Joe or Sally are gonna do in a car. And it frightens me as a VRU. I ride my bike to this building pretty much every day. I stay off the roads because I do not trust drivers, even in bike lanes. I do not trust drivers. So I take that upon myself to make that decision. So it collectively comes back to a society of protect others. And I think we try to do that from an engineering perspective as much as possible. We try to make the right decisions. Unfortunately, we try to solve for one problem and potentially we create another. I don't think that's in every situation, but I think it's in some of the cases. But at the end of the day, people need to slow down and pay attention. And I think from a safety perspective, we are definitely going to try to implement the decisions in the projects that are in the current version of the 10-year plan. With that, we're also going to push out as much media, press releases, campaigns, try to talk reasonable to individuals and try to I want to go back to my childhood and do the scared straight, but I want to, do something like that. So we'll see how it goes, but it's a great question. I absolutely understand where you're coming from. I wish I could put it into my calculator and figure out what's going to happen. I just don't know.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Follow up. So no, I appreciate the response, and this is something that I talked with our local transportation planners when I was on city council, and we have the same issue here. This is what is it's usually three things that folks fall back on, right? It's education, as you mentioned, right? Enforcement, which we also talked about, and then there's just the driver. And we can't really control individual behaviors, right? We can try to educate folks. We can try to hold bad actors accountable. So I'm just, I guess where I'm really struggling, and I just want to be clear, I don't mean this as an attack or blame or anything like that. It's just, if we know that folks behave certain ways when we give them more space, and again, it's like some of those things are like kind of counterintuitive, because like, if you are a responsible driver and you can see further and you can see that, oh, there's someone coming in my direction, I'm going to be extra sure to make sure I'm going to be in my lane, right? Whereas other people are like, oh, there's someone coming, I can see them over there, or there's no one coming, I'm just going to floor it. And then they end up losing control, hit the side of the road or spin out or whatever the case may be. It kind of comes back to the built environment that we're given them, right? And I know that there are maybe some edge cases where folks, even in a very narrow drive lane, will still speed. Or your case, the example you gave too, of someone just being impatient and wanting to pass, right? This is a serious issue in rural roads, right? And that's why we provide passing lanes. But yeah, I think it's that's something I'm expecting to solve right now, but I'd like to actually, similar to how we're having conversations around Bustang, I would love to actually have like this kind of more safety focused conversation for our roadways, and like, where can we maybe innovate or push the envelope a little bit in a different direction? So, thank you.
And I was glad to see that you had in your safety slide, I think it was, roadway design is one piece of how you do approach that. I had one quick one, if I may, and then we can wrap up. Culverts were a big deal a couple of years ago. We stuffed some extra money, I think, from the redistribution funds. Where are we on that in the 10-year plan? Are we addressing those still?
I can take that one. So the culvert redistribution funds, the federal redistribution funds we got, those are I can't say all of them. All of the funding didn't go to the 10-year plan because the majority of it went into our asset pools. And we did separate projects that weren't listed on the 10-year plan. Some of the instances, we did pull some of that redistribution money into 10-year plan projects to help replace culverts while we were out there performing that. I would say that we have been looking at, and you can see in some of the Bethany and Jeff's charts, the rollover amounts between fiscal years. That's when you take a look at some of our assets at culvert, we still have a little bit of money rolling over. We haven't got some of those projects out to construction with environmental clearances and stuff when we're working on those culverts and waterways. But I would say that the majority of the money is programmed. We have pushed a lot of it out. So I think we're doing with the pool that we were given, we have I would say, programmed or expended a very high percentage of that.
The long-term funding isn't at a level we need, probably. Yeah. Okay. Anybody else? Go ahead, Commissioner Hart.
I'll make it quick. I know we're behind. Darius, one of the things I was thinking about the scorecard, I've been trying to track that activity since I was on STAC and now that I'm on TC. And I think that those are very valuable. And we've had some conversations saying, okay, well, this is showing where we're doing good, where we're not doing so good. And had a lot of conversations here about what we need to do to try to do better with the limited resources we have. One thing I've always worried about when I'm trying to figure out statistics is a comparative of a small a group of data, basically from one year to the next. And some of the things that we study is showing it over a period of time. And I'm just wondering, we may have done this and I've just forgotten it, but when it comes to the scorecards, frankly, I would love to see not just, what our current score is by category, but have that compared over a period of years so that we can see, has this been steadily going down? Is it flat? Is it going up? Those kind of things. And then comparative to things like how much money we're putting into it, because sometimes we're throwing dollars in and comparatively it doesn't seem to be helping because expenses are going up, things like that. But then the final side is I'm not sure how to do this exactly, but some kind of a percentage of the budget. So when we get hit with this argument saying, hey, you're not doing enough work out there to fix our roads. And we say, look, we are, we're really ramping up the amount of money that we're putting in there. It's always nice to see that, hey, we're going down and here's where the money is. And you can see where we're projecting that that's going to go back up. We have some of that statistics in your report, but my goodness, a little graphic like that really sells the question. But I don't know, does any of that make sense, or have we already seen it and I forgot it?
Yes, I think that was in the August commission packet and it's available online right now at codot.gov under the performance. Now, in terms of like how much money goes to each specific measure, that's a little bit harder to do. Like each goal area, it may be a little bit easier to categorize, like from a budgetary standpoint, each project, it's harder to do as I was trying to answer Commissioner Jones's question. But the actual data, yes, that's available online right now. Yes.
Thank you. And we're at the end of the agenda for the regular meeting. So what we'll do, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Commissioner Ritter, but I would say we won't reconvene. We'll just adjourn from there. So if you don't need to be at the finance or the internal audit meeting, then you're good to go. So thank you all for your patience. And with that, I'll turn it over to Chair Ritter for the internal.
Thank you very much. Appreciate this. Is the meeting of the Audit Committee of the Colorado Transportation Commission. And do I need to take roll on this?
Yes, we call to order. I'd like to take attendance. Chair Ritter.
Here.
Commissioner Barrett.
Here.
Commissioner Cook.
Here.
And Commissioner Masters. I'd like to talk about the agenda. We're going to talk about the motion to approve the December 17th, 2025 minutes, as well as a motion to approve our internal audit proposal, first audit for fiscal year 2027. Next slide, please.
So moved.
And next slide, please.
Second.
Right there. Do I have any approvals on the December 17th, 2025 minutes?
Aye.
Yeah, 2. Ritter.
Aye.
And Commissioner Barrett, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any noes, nays?
Oh,
No. Okay, thank you.
it passed.
All right, next slide, please. I have Brooke Boyle here from the Audit Division. She's one of our team leaders, and I would like for her to speak about the next audit. Thank you.
So the internal audit team would like to propose a audit with overcompliance with the Cohen's partnership agreement. This potential audit was actually requested by the HR director, Anna Mariotti, as part of her strategy for continuous improvement. And we also think this would be a worthwhile audit as it does impact all CDOT regions and divisions, and it's not an area we have audited before. And can we go to the next slide, please? And in addition, this audit objective would help us address some of the main risk factors impacting CDOT, including our reputation, staffing, employee instructions, and regulatory compliance in particular. Any questions?
I just wish to mention that upon further examination, I think this is a very good idea to move forward on this.
Okay. We'd like an approval on our audit plan for.
Yes, I propose approval of the audit plan.
And Chair Ritter.
I'll second.
Commissioner Masters and Commissioner Barrett, thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Passes. Thank you very much. That's the end of the audit committee. Thank you.
Well, this concludes the meeting of the audit. So adjourned. You know,
Very great, congratulations.
yeah, great, yeah.
See everybody bright and early for breakfast tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you.